that we can do anything we put our minds to. You're smart and beautiful, I'm less smart and even less beautiful. Adriana laughed again through her tears. Eric seemed to gain more confidence. Together we can both learn how to raise this baby. I want to be there for both of you, every day for as long as I live. So? Eric smiled up at her. Adriana Miracle Haddock, would you marry me? Her heart felt like it might explode out of her chest. Adriana nodded shakily, but her smile was radiant. Yes. Yes, I will, Eric. A mixture of joy and relief washed over Eric's face. He jumped to both his feet and then he was kissing her, brushing a hand over her braided hair and around her waist. Adriana curled her hands into his own hair, pressing close to his chest. She couldn't believe that this was happening, it was all so surreal and strange and... Eric pulled back from her lips with a sharp pop, grinning uncontrollably. He rested his forehead on hers. I love you so much, Annie. Adriana couldn't stop grinning, she thought her face was going to split. I love you too, Eric. Oh, here. Eric held up the box, opening it once more. With bated breath, he took the ring out and slid it onto her left ring finger. She looked at it in shock for a few moments, disbelieving how easily it fit and how beautiful it was. Where did you get this? Adriana finally asked. Eric nuzzled her cheek with his nose. I bought the diamond from Johan. What? Adriana gasped. Now don't give me that look, Eric said half sternly. It was a very responsible purchase and I'm quite proud of it. Anyway, the band is pure silver. He looked askance. I drew the design. Adriana looked up at him in surprise. You did? Yes, Eric ran a hand through his hair, mussing it even further than she had, she thought with no small amount of satisfaction. And your dad and brother made it? The ring, I mean. They did. Adriana gasped. She stared down at it once again, shocked that all the important men in her lives had made something so special for her. Eric prattled about the details of making the ring, the nights they spent making it and how great Hiccup still was at making things, and even how Finn put in his fair share of work when it hit her. Eric. Yes? He asked, smiling down at her. Adriana grinned up at him, bouncing a little on the balls of her feet. We're getting married. Eric laughed and pressed his forehead back to hers. Yes, we are. Stretching upward, Adriana kissed him gently. Thank you. For what? Eric murmured. For being so amazing. In response, Eric captured her mouth once again, his arm sliding around her back to press her closer to him. Adriana lost herself in his mouth and hands, gasping slightly when he nipped her lip and kissing him back just as passionately when... Ow! Adriana lurched back, putting a hand to her stomach. Eric gazed down at her stomach. Was that? She looked up at him in surprise. Was that what? Eric's teal eyes darted between her stomach and her face. I felt that. You felt that, did you? Adriana asked a little sardonically. The kick was hard enough, I wouldn't. Annie. What? Eric blinked at her. How long has he been kicking? Adriana froze. Well, maybe I haven't really noticed. He must not be kicking that hard if you didn't notice until now, Eric grinned, looking down at her belly. He glanced back up at her through his bangs and she gave him a knowing smile. Oh, go on. Eric instantly rested a hand on the slight swell of her belly, feeling in various angles to find movements. They waited, Adriana both anxious to feel another kick and enjoying the sensation of Eric's hands on her stomach when jab. Ow, geez kid. Adriana winced. I felt him. Eric exclaimed. That's amazing. Adriana laughed. You surprise me too. Mr. Larson. Eric's eyes darted up to hers and she felt a thrill in her stomach that wasn't the baby. Eric stepped closer, murmuring, what did I tell you about calling me that? Well, being your future wife and all. Adriana pouted, crawling a couple fingers up his chest before hooking them in the neck of his shirt. I didn't think you'd mind all that much. No. Eric smirked. She jerked him back down and began kissing him in earnest, Eric's hand still resting on her belly even as the baby began to kick her once again. "Mommy's a bit busy," Adriana muttered, fighting back a moan as Eric's mouth trailed kisses down her jawline to below her ear. "And anyway, since when is it a boy?" Eric kissed her soundly once more before replying, since Cliff insisted it was a girl. Adriana giggled. "Always a competition." "Yup," Eric sighed, wrapping his arms around her waist once more. "As much as I'd love to stay here, we've got something else on the agenda." "Oh?" Adriana asked in surprise. "Dinner," Eric said in a knowing way that made her wonder what else he might have in store for her. 20 minutes later, Adriana received her answer when they entered the great hall hand in hand, and a crowd of people began to cheer. Once her initial shock was over, Adriana merely raised an eyebrow at her new fiancé. Eric only gave her a cheeky grin and pulled her into the hall after him. His entire family was there, except Nicola's. His wife Melanie ran toward them almost instantly to say congratulations before scurrying out the hall doors. Eric explained later that while Nicola's remained a stubborn mule, he had no qualms with keeping some semblance of a friendship with Mel. Not wishing to anger her husband, however, she told Eric she would come by for the celebrations but only briefly. Eric was thankful enough for that. All their friends and their families were there. The chef and Ben the baker had pulled out all the stops, filling the tables to the brim with their best courses and desserts, despite the fact that only a third of the village had been invited. Grandma Ingerman had even made brownies, per Fearless Finn's request. He'd at long last conceded that the old woman was indeed the best brownie maker in the archipelago, and she joked that now that she had Finn's permission, she supposed she could now make brownies of her own free will. Laughing at the banter, Eric and Adriana walked around and around, Adriana showing all the women her ring and casting dazzling smiles at her new fiancé, and all the men pounding him on the back for his work well done. They continuously held hands throughout the entire celebration, even as they finally sat down and ate. It was when the men were breaking out the kegs at last that Adriana finally spotted him. She knew he was around somewhere, but being the chief, people always managed to grab his attention at the most inopportune times. Jumping from her seat, she pulled Eric toward her parents. "Come on. I'm coming." Eric laughed, dodging a table that she nearly plowed him into. Hiccup's smile broadened as they approached and, at long last, she released her fiancé's hand so she could fiercely hug her father. Hiccup held her tightly to his chest as if he wanted to hold her there forever. "Thank you," Adriana whispered in his ear. She heard and felt his smile broaden even more, if such a thing was even possible. "Congratulations, baby." Chapter 28, Love and Loss. Chapter text. Fearless Finn was at a loss. In the weeks following his sister and best friend's engagement, it seemed as if the comments concerning his own romantic life had tripled. Despite this fact, he was of the sound mind that his romantic life was completely non-existent. While this fact only annoyed him to the extent that his fellow Burkians only seemed to point it out on a constant basis, he wasn't sure what to do about a certain dark-haired friend of his. He was well aware of Inga's crush. Not only that, but it seemed that with the spirit of congratulating Adriana and Eric on their engagement, Inga seemed to be making more of an effort to spend time with him. He'd find her outside the forge on his lunch breaks, wrapped in a thick coat and her cheeks pink from windburn as if she'd waited for him to emerge for some time. He'd almost asked her why she didn't just come inside the toasty forge and wait, but thought better of it. He hadn't wanted her to make a habit of encroaching on his workspace. She'd practically made it her purpose to memorize his routine. Everywhere he seemed to be, she was there with the exception of her own work hours. His usual route to the Great Hall, the hatchery, the forge, Cliff and Eric's house. It seemed lately he couldn't go anywhere without being bombarded by Inga. And that's what it felt like, bombardment. Inga had made it her mission, it seemed, to do everything with him. He should feel flattered, excited at the prospect that a girl, particularly a pretty one, thought so highly of him and wanted to spend personal time with him. Sadly, that wasn't the case. Finn found himself growing more agitated as time went on. He wasn't angry with her, he was actually rather insecure. He wanted to be upfront and tell her that perhaps she should give him a little space, maybe if she weren't so pushy he'd come around in time. Maybe they had some potential for a future relationship, but encroaching on his personal space at all random hours of the day. Finn was at a loss. His family had picked up on this. Hiccup would see her coming from a mile away and whisk Finn into a side street under the pretense that they needed to discuss chiefly things. Sometimes this was true, but even Inga didn't step on the chief's toes. Finn was grateful for his dad's backup in this. It seemed his old man knew more about his feelings than even he did. But Finn hadn't been too keen on discussing the dilemma and kept brushing it off as not a big deal, even though inside all he felt was indignation whenever he saw her coming. So it was here at the Haddock home that he sat in miserable silence as the family discussed housing plans for Eric and Adriana. They'd been going round and round with potential ideas for days. Finn felt like that was all his thought process did anymore: think of ways to hide from Inga, regret not plucking up the courage to confront her, and hide from her again the very next day. It was becoming a very old routine that he hated. "What do you think, Finn?" He blinked out of his reverie. Eric, Adriana and his parents were all gazing at him silently. "Sorry, what was the question?" "How do you feel about Cliff moving in here?" Finn snorted softly. "It's interesting." "Is that a positive or negative response?" Astrid asked. "Both." Finn absently rubbed at the slave mark hidden under his hair. "Have you mentioned it to him?" "I want us all in agreement before we do," Hiccup said. "If you don't like the idea, then..." "No, it's fine." "How bad can it be?" Finn leaned back in his chair. "I mean, it's Cliff, he's loud. It can't get much worse than we already know." "Trust me," Eric remarked in an airy tone. "It gets worse. As long as you keep him well fed and pick your socks off the floor, I'm sure it will be fine." Adriana agreed. "Why socks?" Hiccup asked. Eric rolled his eyes. "He has an obsession with dirty clothes going in the hamper." "What, cleanliness?" Finn gasped. "What a novelty." Astrid put a hand to her chest. "Imagine, putting dirty clothes in the laundry basket." "Who could have imagined?" Eric huffed in embarrassment even as the others laughed. "I'm just saying, he can be a bit of a handful. I'm just warning you ahead of time. He will encroach on your personal space to make sure you cleaned properly." "Sounds good to me," Astrid chirped. "The master bedroom?" Eric asked flatly. "Do you have a working lock?" "We have 2 teenagers." "Oh." Finn slapped his hands over his ears. "Just a comment." Eric's face was turning slightly pink at the hole he'd just dug himself into, but he plowed on. "Make sure it works." "I'm not kidding, he'll find a way in and clean every nook and cranny. I've fought creatures crazier and more vicious than Cliff," Hiccup mused. "What's another boy in the house? Plus an actual clean one." Astrid cheered again, grinning at her son. "Sounds good to me." Finn merely stuck his tongue out at her. Eric and Adriana smirked at each other knowingly, making Finn wonder if he should reconsider his final answer. But still he said, "Go ahead and pitch it to him. I don't care." With a smirk at his sister, he added, "I'm losing her either way, so fine with me." "Oh please," Adriana rolled her eyes. "I'll be back. You'll be the first one to change the diapers." Finn snorted. "A woman's job." Astrid's eyes narrowed. "What's that?" "Kidding. Now he's doubly getting diaper duty." Adriana grinned. "Joy." Hiccup stood and ambled into the kitchen where he poured himself a cup of strong coffee. "I'll have you both know that I changed many diapers in my day." He was actually quite good at it. "You, Mom, Dad, please, spare us the details." Finn winced. "Like what?" Hiccup returned to the table, grinning. "You mean when you peed all over my best flight suit?" "Shrunk the leather," Astrid added. "It was devastating." Hiccup nodded emphatically. "Pretty sure it was worse than Tough Nut's old boots that were covered in mildew." "Oh gods, you had to remind me." Adriana's nose was wrinkled. "Was the mildew inside or outside the boots?" "Mostly inside," Hiccup mused, sipping his coffee and ignoring Finn's look of disgust. If there was one thing Finn hated, it was unkempt, smelly boots. By the time the mildew grew outside the boots, we were past the point of no return. Finn covered his ears with his hands. "La la 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 la." Adriana swatted his arm. "Baby. I don't like disgusting shoes, okay? The thought that some people don't even take them off at night, they just sleep in them as if their toes might freeze off in the night. That used to happen, you know. Astrid intoned. Well, whatever. Finn exclaimed. Some people don't even wear socks, it's just you. He shook his head around to ward off a shiver. Eric looked at him in surprise. You learn something new every day. I didn't know you were so grossed out by shoes. It's the unkempt shoes that are a problem. He's always been like that, surprisingly. Astrid replied. He'd play in the mud all day, every day if we let him, but his boots. She rolled her eyes and gave her son a playful smile. The tears we'd have to endure when we got up the next day and found dirt in his boots. Your feet get hot and the dirt turns to mud between your toes. Finn pinched the bridge of his nose. It squishes around and you can feel it all day. It's the most disgusting thing one can possibly endure. Eric's and Hiccup's shoulders were shaking at the force of their laughs. Finn sighed, sharing an amused look with his mom and sister. This, he supposed, was what family was for. These were the people who knew everything about you at the end of the day, and as for the future brother-in-law, he'd catch up eventually. Adriana waited for their laughter to subside before commenting. Well, at any rate, we have a plan. Let's talk to Cliff tomorrow and see what he thinks. But in the meantime she stole a look at Eric, whose eyebrows raised. We have wedding plans to configure. Yeah, he sighed, blowing his bangs out of his eyes. When's the date? Finn asked, settling into his chair. November 15th. Finn bolted upright again. What? So soon? That's just over a month away. Well, we thought the sooner the better, Eric said, meeting Adriana's eyes. Some sort of understanding seemed to pass between them. The more time we have to figure everything out before the baby comes, the better. Plus Adriana turned back to her brother with a slight pout. I could become the size of a moose any day now. If I can still fit into a nice dress in a month, well, it would be nice. That's it. Finn raised an eyebrow. You're getting married in just over 30 days, so you can wear a beautiful wedding dress fit for a queen. Hiccup interrupted forcefully. We'll do what we can. Besides, the baby is due in February and the convocation is in March. If Eric and Addie are already settled long before then, well, it will make me feel better. Finn heard the unspoken words. It wasn't just about the chieftain seeing his sister as a settled, married woman with a baby on the way. There would indeed be less questions that way. But it was more than that. If Brandine should make an appearance. It's a good plan. He finally agreed, giving his sister a small smile. She beamed back at him. Just don't make me wear flowers. Oh Finn, we forgot to tell you, Eric said with a grin. You're the flower girl. The family burst into laughter, Finn reddening only slightly. He imagined himself walking down the aisle tossing flower petals with a dramatic flair. Oh, he'd never hear the end of it. I'd sooner sleep in my boots, and that's saying something. It was at that exact moment that a knock sounded at the door. Hiccup stood and glanced out the window, and gave a surprised, HMPH. It's Inga. Finn jumped out of his chair and hid in the kitchen below the cabinets. The family gawped at where his empty chair sat and he stuck his head out from around the corner. Eric, pull my chair in so she doesn't know I was there. Eric didn't comment as he stuck out his prosthetic and pulled the chair toward the table. Finn winced as the chair scraped loudly across the wooden floors as Hiccup approached the door. He seriously wanted to throttle his friend, even if his wedding day was in less than a month. The door opened and he held his breath. Inga, to what do I owe the pleasure? Is Finn here? Her familiar voice sounded. I was wondering if he wanted to take a walk. Finn closed his eyes and prayed hard that his dad, who never lied to anyone if he could help it, would come up with a good cover story. Please don't rat me out, please don't rat me out. He's not at the forge. Inga tittered. Chief, he's never at the forge after 7. Don't you think it's a little cold for a walk after 7? Not if Finn's with me. Finn winced. Hiccup, however, didn't miss a beat. Perhaps, but you know I think your dad might not like you walking in the dark woods. Does he know you're out? No, but... Well, I think it best if you head on home tonight, okay Inga? Far be it from me to send another man's daughter into the deep, dark recesses of the forest alone. Finn waited, the rest of the family seemed to be holding their breath as well. Okay, came Inga's flat response. Another short pause. Good night, Chief. You sure you can make it on your own? Hiccup asked. Inga laughed softly. I got here okay, didn't I? See you later. Good night, Inga. Her footsteps retreated from the porch. It was a few moments before the front door closed and Finn realized the room had become quite cold. He emerged from his hiding place with a heavy sigh as Hiccup faced him with a concerned eye. Dad, I owe you one. When exactly do you plan on breaking that girl's heart? Hiccup asked. Finn pursed his lips. If I can avoid it. You can't avoid it. Eric intoned. It's not my fault she's so clingy. Adriana looked at him with sympathy. Yes, but how do you think it's going to make her feel as you gradually cut her out of your life without an explanation? Finn groaned and pressed his forehead into the wood grain countertop. I never signed up for this. We know that, Finn, but she is your friend. She deserves your honesty. Hiccup took his seat once again. Nothing will change if you ignore the problem. Why can't it be simple like those two? Finn whined, feeling childish. Eric gave him an incredulous smile. You think this is simple? Adriana nodded with wide, emphatic eyes. No, I know it's not, Finn sighed. But you guys make it look so easy. It's not. Adriana said quietly. She paused, watching her brother as if in thought. Do you want me to talk to her? Finn saw their parents' equally pinched brows, but they said nothing. He so dearly wanted to shout yes, but knew that was not the right response. No, he sighed, giving her a wan smile. I'll do it. If I have the guts to knock out Manny the Mad in a sparring match, I can be honest with Inga. The family tittered, giving him amused smiles. A few days prior he'd sparred with Manny the Mad at the arena. If anyone knew anything about Manny, it was that he'd trained in war technique and weaponry since he was a child. He knew every defensive and offensive move, and his angry spirit made him a formidable opponent. Not many had the guts to challenge him, as Finn had, let alone knock him out cold. Mara was still treating his concussion. If there was anything people didn't do, it was beat Manny the Mad at his own game. Finn had had the courage to do that, perhaps a little too much courage he could admit. But he didn't have the guts to talk to Inga. He felt awkward and unsure. Inga knew what she wanted and fought for it. He admired that in her. He himself was a man of action. Why sit and talk about issues when you could solve so much with a simple task? No need to waste time debating. Inga was like that. So why did he feel so uncomfortable with her pursuits? It couldn't just be her. There had been a time, not long ago, that he'd considered her as perhaps more than a friend. But something had changed recently, and whatever it was, it seemed it was only driving them farther apart than closer together. Perhaps, he thought suddenly, it was simply because she went out of her way. He already knew how she felt, so why did she feel the need to prove herself to him? Was it simply that he wasn't making any moves or effort toward her that she decided to hold on tighter? They'd never even discussed dating before, so how was he even supposed to bring it up? It felt like he was breaking up with her when they'd never even had a date. But that, Finn realized, was the problem. Inga was infatuated with him, and as a result she was doing everything she possibly could to reel him in, like a fish. Something squirmed uncomfortably in his stomach and he realized he was scowling. His parents didn't seem to notice. They were deep in conversation with Eric about house plans again. Adriana, however, was watching with her keen green eyes. She seemed to see his inner distress and stood, patting Eric on the back. I want a fuzzy blanket. Finn, want to help me find one? Finn said nothing as he followed her up the stairs, occupied as he was with his train of thought. He followed her to her bedroom and she pulled open her closet, pointed to the top shelf where a pink, flowery blanket was resting. Figures, Finn murmured, reaching up to get the blanket. Shorty. Talk to me. Adriana said, ignoring the jibe. She accepted the blanket in thanks and immediately bundled up on her bed. Only her head and yellow mane of hair could be seen and he held back a laugh. Ignore my dorkdom, talk to me. Finn sighed, running a hand through his hair. I'm just frustrated, I guess. In the last few weeks it feels like Inga's been extra clingy. She has. Adriana agreed. And I admit it, I've been hiding from her. I'd spare us both the trouble if I just told her honestly that I don't like her like that, and she's making me feel uncomfortable with the constant. Finn paused, taking a deep breath. He was getting more agitated by the moment. You're not wrong for feeling that way, you know. Finn watched his twin. She was, in every sense, his opposite. She saw things he didn't, conversely, so did he in regards to her perspective. He took a deep breath. I feel like she's putting me in a box. Like she's thought through all the things we have in common and she cares about me, and because we've grown up together and have those common factors, she's decided that I'm the one for her. And as a result she's going to darn well make sure it happens. Adriana finished. Yes. In a way that's not a bad thing, but... Finn paused, feeling awkward. He normally wasn't so open with his feelings. I haven't been in a relationship in a long time. I want to be excited about it and work for it too. Not go into it just because I feel strong-armed. Adriana was smiling at him. It's at times like this that I know you've changed. Happiness bloomed in his chest. He smiled back at her, hoping it conveyed his gratefulness. You're already strong, Finn. You, for a lack of a better way to say it, don't need someone just like you. Inga's a great girl and her leadership skills can be put to good use in time, I know it. But I agree, I don't know if it's by your side. As a friend, yes, maybe as our village healer or on your future council. But as your wife. Adriana gave him a small shrug. I don't know the future, but I know you. Finn lay down on her bed, staring up at her ceiling. He felt like a weight had been lifted off his chest. Maybe talking things through wasn't so bad after all. So how do I tell her all this without ruining our friendship? Well, don't even broach the topic of marriage, I'll tell you that much. Adriana warned. If she's even thought that far ahead, and I pray she hasn't, best not to even give her that scenario. Finn grunted in agreement. And well, it's like you said downstairs, Adriana continued, bundling her blanket further around her neck. She looked like a large, pink marshmallow. Honesty is the best way to handle it. I'd say that you value her and her friendship, but you're not interested in a relationship with her. He winced. So blunt. I mean, I can do blunt, but... See, you do care about people's feelings. I'm starting to think you're a bad influence. Finn muttered. Hey, you haven't looked this relaxed in days. I'd say I'd make a good counselor. Finn snorted. You'd certainly chew people's ears off. I'm a rapt listener and a giver of sound advice. And a beautiful bundle of joy. Eric's voice joined them. He was looking in through the open doorway with a fond smile at his future wife. Finn mimed throwing up over the side of her bed. Adriana's foot stuck out her blanket and promptly shoved him off the bed. Careful. Hiccup called at the resounding thwomp. No worries, that was just Finn. Eric called. Yup, he's a klutz. Finn rose from the floor and gave his sister a totally fake stink eye. In fact, he wanted to swoop down and give her a great big hug. But one must not show such emotion in front of their future brother-in-law. Best friends or no, he still had to show Eric who was boss. Or rather, second boss. It must be such a scary thing to marry the chief's daughter, no room for screw-ups. Well anyway, good chat, Anna. Finn mused as Eric sauntered into the room. She gave him an encouraging nod. You'll do fine. You're fearless, Finn. Finn ambled into the hallway with a hollow laugh. He wasn't sure if there had ever been a time in his life that his feelings did not coincide with his name. Adri. Astrid called from the downstairs. You don't have plans next Thursday, do you? Finn heard Adriana and Eric follow him down the stairs back into the dining area. They reclaimed their seats as she frowned in thought. Not that I'm aware of. Why? Because your friends and some ladies want to throw you a baby shower. Astrid smiled knowingly. Oh okay. And Hiccup added. Since the wedding is soon, it's also going to be a wedding shower. Both of you will be more than prepared for life and baby. Eric's cheeks turned a slight pink shade as Adriana beamed at him. That's so sweet. I hope they don't go overboard. I don't know where we're going to put a bunch of gifts. We'll figure it out. Eric took her hand. Finn rolled his eyes. How much stuff can you possibly get? I think it's more the fact that it's two parties combined, Hiccup replied. Moving into your own place for the first time, you quickly find out what things you need that you don't have. Astrid stood and ambled into the kitchen. She filled a few mugs with cider as she continued, cookie sheets for example. We went to make cookies one day and we didn't have any. The husband's displeasure was duly noted. Hiccup winked as she returned and handed out the mugs of cider to the kids. Astrid took a long drink from her own before replying, pregnant though I was, I didn't want to hear any premature whining over stupid things. Stupid things? Hiccup demanded. A lack of cookie sheets at times such as that was disastrous. I had to be prepared. Prepared for what? Astrid asked sweetly. Well, cravings, obviously. Finn snorted, taking a drink from his own mug. Adriana giggled. Cookie cravings are both amazing and disastrous, it's true. What was your worst craving though? Hiccup grimaced as if tasting something horrible. Astrid promptly slapped him on the shoulder, which sadly was without his usual shoulder padding. The sound reverberated through the room and Finn laughed out loud. Pickled peas. Astrid replied calmly. You. Adriana grimaced, the expression nearly matching her dad's. I haven't had any weird cravings like that. Not yet. Hiccup muttered, earning a mock scathing look from his wife. He merely grinned back. If me and Anna caused you to want pickled peas, then it's probably a good thing it was the only pregnancy you ever had. Finn chortled, taking another drink of his cider. It wasn't. Hiccup replied instantly. Finn choked, cider spraying onto the table. Eric not only lurched back to avoid the spray, but also to pound him on the back from the force of his hacking. His throat burned and eyes watered, it took him nearly a minute to regain his voice, which was just as incredulous as Adriana's expression. What? Hiccup was wincing. Astrid's arms were crossed and while she didn't look upset, she had raised a single foreboding eyebrow. Good job. I didn't think, it just came out. Hiccup hissed. Eric leaned back in his chair with a sigh. Smooth delivery. Finn and Adriana both whipped toward him. You knew. It was Eric's turn to grimace. His eyes flicked to Astrid. Special circumstance. Hang on. Adriana waved her hands in front of her. We almost had a sibling. Astrid's face softened in a way Finn had never seen before. There was sorrow there and Hiccup's eyes were downcast. The thought, the very idea. Finn's mind was blown. It had never occurred to him before that he'd almost had another sister or a little brother. That it could have ever been an option. Excitement bloomed in his chest at the realization, but just as fast, the emotion snuffed out. For he was indeed lacking one such person in his life. You both were 3, Astrid said softly. I lost him early. 16 weeks. Finn's mouth felt dry. Him. Hiccup nodded dimly. It was a boy. Oh Mom, Daddy, Adriana said softly. Why did you never tell us? Hiccup shook his head. After Trista, things were so hard back then, we didn't want to upset you further. He met their eyes in turn and Finn could see nervousness there. Are you upset? Finn shook his head a bit dumbly. I'm a bit gobsmacked to be honest. It never occurred to me. We wanted to tell you, Astrid said. But by the time things were turning around, it was hard for us to talk about. And then Dager had to stick his big nose into our lives. Things went downhill from there. Hiccup remarked bitterly. Finn thought back as hard as he could. He could barely remember when Adriana had been kidnapped. He remembered the emotions better than actual circumstances. He remembered his parents being upset and being confused himself. He could still feel the pit of confusion in his stomach when his sister would burst into tears or bite randomly out of fear. He hadn't understood then what he understood now. But at the same time, his parents had had a miscarriage. He never would have guessed anything else had happened. It was hard for a while. Astrid added. It still hurts to think about. But after Dager, and we made up, she nodded at Hiccup. I decided that I needed to stop looking back on what could have been. I still look back and... Her voice caught and she paused, trying to keep composure. Hiccup reached over and took her hand. I still wish I could have him. But it wasn't meant to be. I did, however, have two beautiful kids right here. I needed to be here for you. She nodded resolutely, giving each of them a strong smile. So that's what I've been trying to do. Finn's mind was spinning. He truly had the best parents. They'd been through so much for him and his sister, sacrificed so much, kept secrets and put up boundaries and lectured them when they screwed up. It was frustrating to the bitter end. But he supposed that's what it meant to be a parent, to love your kids no matter what happened that day. To protect them and teach them when they did something wrong. They kept going for their kids every day, no matter how hard life got. They hadn't quit on him and Adriana after all this time. How could he have ever doubted them? Did you name him? Eric asked softly. Finn blinked. People named their lost babies. He'd never thought about it before. In a swift glance, he realized Eric and Adriana were holding hands, her free one resting on her belly. His dad was still holding his mom's hand, this thumb rubbing small circles in her palm. A strange sense of longing filled him suddenly. Darin. Astrid whispered, staring at empty space over their shoulders. His name was Darin. The house was silent for many minutes, each Haddock and one Larson lost in his or her own thoughts. Finn still couldn't wrap his mind around the fact that he could have had a little brother. They could have wrestled and explored together and climbed around on Toothless like he used to. Maybe he'd have liked weapons like his big brother, or books like Adriana. Would he have had red hair or blonde? Maybe he would have had brown hair. Blue or green eyes. What kind of dragon would he have picked? With a jolt, Finn did the calculations. Darin would have been 14 this year. Question after endless question filled his mind. He'd almost had a little brother. And now they'd never know what could have been. A gentle hand rested on his shoulder. He looked up to see Adriana smiling softly at him. He wondered if he looked as depressed as he felt. We'll never know what could have been, she said quietly, looking at each of them in turn. But maybe we'll have a second chance. Love and respect bloomed in his chest at her words. How did she do that? By all rights, she should be the most pessimistic person at this table. Yet she always knew just what to say to lift someone's spirit. Eric beamed at her even as she smiled down at the swell of her belly. Finn usually ignored her baby bump, he thought it was strange to look at for too long. He supposed he was awkward like that. But like everyone else, his gaze was drawn down in time to see the material of her shirt shift and jab outward. Finn blinked. Was that a kick? Yeah, she's been knocking on my bladder for a good hour. Adriana sighed. Hiccup chuckled, shooting an amused look at Astrid. She. Astrid teased. Honestly, it keeps changing. Eric grinned. Finn snorted with a firm shake of his head. It's a boy. He stood and quickly retrieved a wet hand towel so he could mop up the mess of cider from all over the table. It has to be. Why is that? Adriana asked. Finn tossed the towel into the wash bin from across the room. It landed in with a mighty splash. He earned himself a scowl from his mother, but he finished his reply, "'Cause boys are awesome. Oh yeah, until they whiz all over your clothes." Uproarious laughter followed Hiccup's dry remark. Finn was halfway through his reply when Adriana grabbed his hand and moved it toward her belly. He tried to pull away. "Oh no, do I feel your nephew kick, Finnegan?" Finn sighed. It was a girl 2 minutes ago. His hand was now resting on the curve of her belly. He fought the urge to retract his hand. It was such an odd sensation to rest his entire hand on his sister's stomach, but it had been swelling outward like a cantaloupe for months. Now that cantaloupe was currently poking into his palm every few seconds. "Gods, that is weird," Finn said, trying to be blessed, but he couldn't keep the slight awe out of his voice. "Just you wait till it's yours, you won't think it's weird." Hiccup had a mischievous glint in his eye that made Finn grab his empty cup and promptly walk to the kitchen. "Suddenly I need a stronger drink," Honestly, I can't believe how flustered he gets. Adriana exclaimed. A year ago you were flirting with every girl who'd talk to you. Finn snorted, pouring himself more cider. It's awkward talking to girls when everyone is watching me. He turned back to the table but leaned against the countertop instead. I know, don't give me that look, he said to his parents. Just be myself and the right person will come along despite prying eyes, yada yada, but still, it's awkward. You guys don't ever feel awkward around your friends. Hiccup cleared his throat, glancing at his wife. Finn didn't see his mom's responding expression but he decided he didn't want to. After a while, Finn Hiccup said calmly. You stop caring what other people think. Amen to that. Eric concurred. Finn sighed. He didn't want to think about relationships and dating anymore. Right now it felt like it was more hassle than it was worth. He knew this wasn't strictly true. He looked forward to having a girlfriend someday. But it was an odd position to be in, feeling like the third wheel on all sides, with all his friends in serious relationships and he, Finn, had the pick of the flock in all of Burke and he didn't really fancy any of them. Inga. Finn mentally sighed. He'd really need to talk to her. He couldn't avoid her forever, and that alone had to be hurting her feelings. The familial revelries continued on into the night until Eric finally bade Adriana a long good night on the porch, which probably involved a lot of hands and lips. The candles were doused and everyone at long last retreated to bed, Adriana dragging her pink, fluffy blanket behind her like a queen. Finn went to bed happy and feeling good. However, as he lay wide awake into the long hours of the night, he couldn't help his swirling thoughts from turning back to his friend he'd been avoiding and the little brother he'd never know. Chapter 29, The Edge. Chapter text. Hiccup lifted the lid on a huge wooden bin, hearing his son and future son-in-law do the same on the other side of the cluttered storage room. They were currently in the forge, rummaging for floor plans of the hatchery. What do you need these for again? Finn asked, half his body buried in another wooden box. The scraping sounds of parchment could be heard from within. Hiccup heaved a heavy box onto the desk and began pilfering the contents at a rapid pace. Marvin has been asking me to help with the reorganization for weeks, and I haven't had the time with the harvest and preparing for winter. He came to me again last night upset that I hadn't helped him yet. Why can't he take care of it? Annoyance flared in his chest, but not at his son. Because he's old. Eric and Finn both guffawed, shocked that he'd said such a thing out loud. Hiccup usually never spoke a rude word about another person, deeming it unbecoming of a chieftain and immature to boot. But sometimes. Why don't you delegate it? Eric asked when their laughter subsided. Because I drew the hatchery plans myself, and he's always worked directly with the chief, Hiccup muttered, shoving the useless box away. He insisted on asking my father to help with things as well. You have every right to say no and delegate it. Finn said, re-emerging from the box with dust coating his red hair. Hiccup straightened with a huff. I know, I just feel compelled to help everyone. Finn groaned. Dad, you're one man. You can't do everything. He's got a point, Eric intoned from inside another box. Groaning, he lifted a metal box, the contents inside clattering. Besides, with the wedding and all, people should be more considerate or understanding. More than ever you should be able to hand it off to someone else. Exactly. Finn exclaimed, inspecting some old snowshoes. Throwing them back into the box, he added, it's not like we can have the wedding anywhere else. They'll just have to deal. The words struck a chord in Hiccup's mind. He stopped dragging his hand through his hair, staring at nothing while the boys continued to lecture him on chiefly duties as if they were experts on the topic. He considered the thought, wondering if it was possible. Oh. I know that look. Great, he's got an idea. Finn sighed, hopping up to sit on a crate. Or he's taken our advice to heart, Eric grinned. Wouldn't it be cool if the chief started taking notes from us? Hiccup turned on his heel and marched to the farthest corner of the room he could reach. He vaguely heard the boys' sputtered confusions, probably because he didn't reply to Eric's sarcasm in kind. He threw open the doors of an old cabinet, which squeaked in protest. Waving the billowing dust away, Hiccup coughed and began looking through the old maps. What in tarnation are you looking for? Dude, you spend too much time with Cliff. Just wait until he moves in with you, then you'll start saying things like fantabulous and fruitilicious and... Aha! Hiccup exclaimed, pulling out the map he'd been looking for. Dumping the others back in the cabinet, he spread it out on a crate. The boys peered over his shoulder, each blinking in surprise. Hiccup tapped an island to the east. We'll need to scope it out, see what kind of shape it's in. Finn's brow was furrowed. What? The chief looked up in surprise. Oh, right, I haven't told you about it before. The edge. Both boys blinked. What's the edge? Eric asked, intrigued. It's a hideout the original 6 riders made. Somewhere we could go to find and train dragons and keep an eye on our enemies. Lots of crazy adventures on the edge. Finn looked deeply insulted. You mean to tell me you and Mom have had a secret hideout all this time and you never mentioned it? I forgot about many an unimportant thing after you and Addy were born, Hiccup remarked defensively. Unimportant? Eric interrupted before Finn could continue. What's that have to do with your intense workload and the villagers' constant occupying of your time? Hiccup chewed his lip. Well, he swallowed, still thinking. What if we did the wedding there? The boys were silent. Please to excuse. Finn asked. Eric snorted, smiling amusedly at Finn. I second that. Like I said, we'd have to look it over, see if it's still stable. If you think after all these years that any campsites are still in working order, much less for a wedding. Finn chortled. Campsite? Hiccup straightened indignantly. Excuse me, but we built full-blown buildings and an armory and a forge on that island, even a dragon pen. Finn's look of insult strengthened. Are you freaking kidding me? Eric patted his shoulder. And why would we do the wedding there instead of Burke? Because it would give the family some space, peace and quiet, new scenery. Hiccup counted on his fingers as he spoke. He was more excited with the idea the more he spoke. Honestly though, we won't be able to make any decisions until we take a look. Chances are after almost 20 years those buildings are unstable. I won't get my hopes up. Well, I'm going to get a look at that armory, Finn said, turning and walking towards the door. What, right now? Hiccup called with a laugh. You don't even know how to get there. So take me on a field trip, old man. Finn called back. Gods know we could use a vacation, however small. He disappeared outside and Hiccup pursed his lips. Eric smirked at him with crossed arms. Well, you can't argue with that logic. How do you feel about it, Eric? Hiccup asked seriously. We can still look for kicks, but you're the groom. I'm interested enough, Eric said, leading the way toward the front. We should talk to Annie first, and probably Mama Astrid. Mama Astrid. Hiccup snickered at the nickname. I'm sure she'd love to come just to see the place. He stopped when they emerged in the sunlight and he spotted Snotlout talking to Rough Nut and Tough Nut. Actually, I'm sure the whole gang would love to go. Except both Injamans have little kids still. Eric reminded him. Oh yeah. Hiccup mused. Well, I'll invite them anyway. They can figure out something for their small army. Now that, Chief, Eric grinned. Is an excellent plan. Anna. Cliffy. You were supposed to entertain me. Was I? Cliff glanced sideways at his friend, who was smirking at him through narrowed eyes. Adriana crossed her arms defiantly. I just came by because I was tired of reading. Adriana said, tapping her fingers on her arm. I'm not much of an entertainer. Tell me a story. Cliff demanded, turning back to the beading he was doing. You tell me a story. Adriana shot back. You're going to be a mother. How can you possibly be a mother if you scar your child for life by not telling her a story whenever she asks for one? Since when are you my child? Adriana asked, raising an eyebrow. Since when do you pass up an opportunity to make up a story? Cliff glanced at her again. You feeling okay? Fine. Well, bored. But fine. Adriana leaned forward slightly. You're doing really well with that pattern. Don't change the subject. Cliff pushed aside his beading. I'll change it for you. The pair looked up to see Finn lounging in the doorway. Honestly, Adriana wondered if he wasn't trying to get girls' attention. "Oh come on," Cliff threw down his half-finished beading. Annabelle was just about to. "I've got something more interesting you'll want to hear about." Finn leaned inside with a conspiratorial smirk. "Two somethings actually." Adriana sniggered when Cliff leaned over so far he nearly fell out of his chair. "Oh do tell, fearless Finn, what secrets do you behold?" "I'd tell you if I wanted an axe in my face." Finn withdrew and beckoned them forward. "My parents want you both." "My dad waived your last hour, Cliff." Cliff blinked, glancing at Horst. "He can do that. He's the chief, Cliff. He can do whatever he wants." Finn gave a blissful sigh. "Oh how I long for the day. Dream on, Finnegan, that day is a long, long, long way from today." Adriana strode out the doorway past her brother, careful to not bump her belly against the door jamb on the way out. "What, have you no faith in my leadership skills?" "What leadership skills?" Adriana asked. Finn ignored her, leading the way to the stables. "Someday Anna, I will make a fine chief." Cliff caught up with them a moment later. "Sorry, had to clean up. Horst didn't mind me leaving early, he's a good boss that way." "Do spill your secrets now." "We're just going in here." Finn marched through the stable doorway. "My parents and Eric are waiting." A mixture of hay and fish and manure hit them like a wall and Adriana paused, resting a hand on her stomach. "Ah!" Finn and Cliff screeched to a halt. "Oh. I can tell Dad to meet outs." "No, I'm okay." Adriana gulped. Cliff offered her a handkerchief from his pocket, notifying her on his grandmother's grave, God's rest her soul, that it was clean, and she gratefully pressed it to her nose. When Finn was finally convinced that she wasn't about to spill her guts in the doorway, they pressed on. Her brother's mothering would never stop being both annoying and endearing. Finn led them down a series of stone stairs and caverns. Luckily the scent of fish and manure lessened, as did the temperature. It was nearly November now and with the season change came sleet and hail. However, they'd yet to have their first big snowfall. It was only a matter of days and Adriana hoped that it wouldn't happen until after the wedding. Adriana paused when she found both boys holding a hand up to her. She looked down and realized the last step was steeper and taller than the others. She gratefully accepted their hands and touched down without a hard impact. "Well, at least I know if anything ever happened to me, there's somebody to take care of you." Adriana looked up to see her fiancé already walking toward her from what looked to be a large office area. She gave Eric a swat on the arm when he ushered her inside. "Don't say that." He kissed her temple and wrapping an arm around her waist, leading her to a portion of the room where desks and cabinets filled the space. Her parents were there looking at a couple maps. Her dad gave her a smile when he noticed her arrival. "Addie." He kissed her forehead chastely before brandishing an arm around them. "Welcome to my office. This is where you disappear to sometimes." Adriana looked around, surprised at the massive room. "Sometimes," Hiccup said, leaning back over the maps. Astrid was chewing her lip as if deep in thought. "Wouldn't be the first hideout, eh Dad?" Finn asked from his position at another wall where he was looking up at a large hand-drawn map posted on the wall. Adriana glanced around the various tables and found countless books and measuring instruments, leather bags and satchels surrounded by vials of liquids that she could only guess at the contents. "This almost looks like an experiment room," Adriana commented. "Also, what's the first hideout?" "Yeah, what's the first hideout?" Cliff asked. Adriana blinked. He'd been so quiet, she'd almost forgotten he was there. "We'll get to that in a minute," Hiccup said, and Astrid blinked out of her reverie. They straightened and looked at Cliff. "So we've gone through some scenarios trying to think of where Eric and Addie are going to live after they get married. We could do some rearranging at our house, but the last thing we want to do is kick Finn out of his space." "Not cool." "Not cool," Astrid agreed, smiling at her son. He returned it with a cheeky grin. "So we had another thought." Cliff shuffled his feet. "You okay?" "We thought it would be a good option," Eric began slowly. "If me and Addie live in our place." Cliff blinked. "You okay?" "But we're not going to make you move back in with your parents." Eric tapered off. "Again, not cool." "Yes, thank you, Finn. Don't mention it." Point being, Hiccup said. It's just a thought for now. You paid for half the expense of that place, so if you honestly want to keep living there, Cliff, that's completely fine. Just say the word and we'll think of another plan. But Astrid said, Cliff's grey eyes darting to her. We thought that if you didn't mind the thought, maybe you'd want to move into our house. Adriana and Eric can have their first home in privacy, you won't have to move back home and you can have your own space. Honestly, we're not home very much. So, what do you think? Adriana asked. Shock was written all over Cliff's face. Adriana wasn't sure what to think of his stillness, quietness, or dumbfounded expression. Her dad seemed to pick up on this. Like I said, you can say no. You want me to move into your house? Cliff asked slowly. Hiccup blinked. If you want to. Those steel grey eyes darted to Finn next and the corner of his mouth tilted upward. And he agreed to this. I fought it tooth and nail, but they finally bribed me with a mountain of salty snacks. Adriana sighed. Finn, you are being unbelievably sassy today. I'm preparing for the hard times to come. Oh, if my moving in is going to cause Finn grief, then I'm totally in. Cliff said, eyes twinkling. Yeah? Hiccup asked. Yeah, I mean, who can turn down the opportunity to cause Finn hard times, right? Cliff grinned. I'm sure I'll survive. Nothing a little sass can't fix. Eric leaned down to murmur into Adriana's ear, he won't last 2 days. I'll bet you a plate of mint chocolate chip cookies that he'll last 4 before he loses patience. Adriana countered. Deal. I can still hear you. Get over it, sassafras. Cliff gave a mighty cheer and lunged forward to hug both Haddock parents. I always wanted a set of third parents. What? Hiccup asked meekly as Cliff continued to pound him on the back. Well, I got my parents obviously, and then I've got Taryn's parents who are super duper scary until you get to know them, but once you do they are totally chill, it's like they just want you to think they are scary. Clyde can dance a boogie like none you've ever seen. Crap, that was a family secret. Cliff clapped his hands together in Hiccup's face. The chief jumped back in shock. Forget you ever heard that or he'll kill me. So anyway, I decided recently that it would be absolutely cool if I had a third set of parents. Finn sighed and Eric grinned. Does this mean I win? Crap, I should have said 30 seconds. Cliff was still talking in the background as Finn stuck his tongue out at them. Adriana watched in amusement at her parents' smiles gradually going stiffer and stiffer. They were probably wondering when he was going to take a breath. Eric's nose brushed the shell of her ear and she twitched at the ticklish sensation. I did warn them. Yes, you did, Adriana murmured, looking up at him with a smirk. Mr. Larson. Mom, Dad, Ericana's being gross again. Cliff whipped around with another loud gasp. Finn. This means we can be real brothers. Oh gods. Woo-hoo-woo-woo-woo-woo. Cliff wrapped his arms around Finn's waist and hoisted upward as hard as he could. Finn just stared down at him in displeasure as the curly-haired boy tried once, twice, 3 times to lift Finn off the ground. Cliff stopped at last, panting. Dude, you're really frigging heavy. With an effortless shove, Finn sent Cliff into the pavement. PFT noodle. Adriana cackled, covering her mouth with a hand to lower the volume. The sight of Cliff trying to lift her brother off the ground and the ease with which he shoved Cliff to the floor was hilarious. Eric found her a chair and she laughed until tears were streaming. Hiccup was shaking his head, probably wondering what in the world he'd gotten himself into by sort of adopting Cliff's medley. Astrid was merely smiling and enjoying the fun. Wiping her face with Cliff's hanky, she eventually calmed down enough to look up at Eric. He was giving her one of those doofy smiles, as she liked to call them. She could only wonder at what he was thinking right now. Gods, she was so beautiful. It didn't matter the time of day or what she was wearing, if she was skipping through the streets happily or puking her guts up. He didn't care. Hearing her laugh, seeing her smile, nothing made him happier. She drove him crazy and in a few short weeks they'd be married. The thought still boggled the mind, like it was a dream that would never be reality. But the ring on her finger and the dazzling look in her green eyes couldn't be imagined in any of his wildest dreams. He probably would have kissed her right then and there if Hiccup hadn't cleared his throat in that exact moment. Eric blinked and looked away, feeling the back of his neck burn. He hoped his thoughts weren't easily read by his expression, but then he remembered there was another reason they'd all gathered down here. "So Addie, me and the boys came up with an idea earlier today," Hiccup began. "We wanted to run it by you and hear your thoughts." Eric kept his eyes on her as Hiccup explained about the edge, how they wanted to check it out and see if it was still in living conditions. "I think it would be a nice touch to your wedding if we did it in a private area away from the crowds and people who aren't interested in coming," Hiccup said. "It's only a couple hours journey from here by ship. If it checks out, we could investigate it further. What do you think?" "Mom, what do you think?" Adriana asked. "I'm reserving my opinion for when I see it." Adriana shrugged. "I concur. Let's see what kind of shape it's in. I trust you'll take copious notes. We can make Finn the scribe." Eric joked. "As tempting as that sounds," Hiccup snickered. "We'll need him to scope out the territory for wild dragons. Bringing out the big muscles, I like it." Finn grinned. "Hey, I have big muscles too," Cliff countered. "I'm just more accustomed to lifting bowls of snackage." "Well, snacks are important, you're good for something after all, Cliffy." "Finn, do you need to go on a run?" "Dinner?" Cliff asked. "Do you need to pee?" This time Eric couldn't hold back his laughter from the questions and Finn's unrestrained disgust. Cliff continued, "You're being super salty, and you need to tone it down." Hiccup sighed long and hard as Eric's laughter finally subsided. "If you sassy children can't tone it down, you're all staying home. Sass is officially toned down as of now." Finn brandished a thumbs up before bounding to the doorway. "I'm going to pack my saddle." "Hey, wait a minute." Astrid called. "It's dinner time, we're not going in the dark." "Yeah," Finn drawled. "So unlike the rest of you lazy bums, I plan to pack tonight so we can get an early start." With a final shrug of his eyebrows, he disappeared. "What has gotten into him today?" Hiccup murmured. "He's got a pee, I can promise you," Cliff said. "When I got a pee, the sassiness just comes out because when it starts to get urgent." "Hey Cliff. Maybe a little less detail," Astrid whispered, glancing at Hiccup. "My husband has a weak constitution." "Hey. Oh, so it's hereditary then. That's why Finn's so sassy today, he really does have to pee." Well, regardless, Eric took Adriana's hand and ushered her toward the doorway. "He's all but signed the document. You're an official haddock now, Cliff." Woohoo! Eric and Adriana left her parents alone with Cliff without looking back. As they trekked through the stables, they laughed about the boys and their goofy conversation. While Eric enjoyed the conversation as he always did, really he just wanted a quiet spot with his girl without interruptions for a few minutes. He shook his head, doing his best to dispel any tempting thoughts. In the few weeks of their engagement she'd nearly kissed him senseless on a couple occasions to the point where he didn't know his own name. It was starting to become something he thought about every day, though he honestly tried not to. They weren't married yet and there was a limit. She was pregnant after all. It occurred to him suddenly that he didn't know exactly where that limit was. Most people on their wedding night consummated their marriage. He'd heard of some couples waiting because the wedding day itself was exhausting enough. But this was an extraneous circumstance. Adriana was pregnant, and she'd been raped. He didn't have any expectations. He wasn't about to be that guy. He was in this for her, to be her husband and support in the most intimate relationship possible. They'd already been best friends forever. Only marriage could bring them closer. But part of that union of marriage was procreation. He could wait until after the baby was born, right? Well, he'd have to, she was pregnant. But it would drive him bloody insane if she kept kissing him the way she did. "Hey, are you okay?" Eric blinked hard, looking the other direction. The back of his neck burned. "Why yeah, I'm fine." Gods, did his voice have to crack too? Adriana halted, pulling him to a stop. "What's wrong?" "Nothing." Her green eyes narrowed fiercely and suddenly she looked like Astrid. "Eric Larson, don't lie to me. I can see it in your eyes, just tell me." Eric's mind scattered. How could he possibly tell her about the things he's just been thinking about without sounding like a total pervert? He didn't mean it that way, but that's totally weird, right? The last thing she probably wanted to even think about was that. He shook his head, shoving the thoughts away. It's not important. She sensed the shift in his attitude, he knew it. He could tell by the crease that formed between her brows. He couldn't hide it if he wanted to because she knew him so well. He really couldn't leave it like that though. Not when she was giving him that suspicious look. Really, it's fine. Eric tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. I'll figure it out. We always figure things out together. Adriana said. Yeah, but, well. Eric floundered for a second. Maybe another day. Now she looked concerned. Eric, what's going on? Nothing. Eric stressed, feeling the flush creep up to his ears. I don't want to talk about it right now. Adriana opened her mouth to argue but paused, reconsidering. Curse him for being so easily embarrassed and looking like a blushing, prepubescent teen. He sighed again. Honestly, Annie, it's not a big deal. Not right now anyway. He shook his head, shoving the topic away. Never mind, let's go to dinner. Adriana was quiet throughout the meal. They were halfway through their chicken pot pie when he realized he wasn't talking either. He felt like any happiness they'd felt in her dad's office had been sucked away because he had to go and make things awkward, and now she wasn't talking to him. Finally she broke the silence. Did I do something wrong? She asked innocently. Eric's heart lurched. No, he reached across the table for her hand. Annie, listen to me. How was he supposed to word this? You didn't do anything. I was just thinking about some things and I don't know. Well, Adriana said timidly. You could tell me. He swallowed. I think I need some advice first. Advice? She asked in confusion. You've never needed advice before. Usually we just talk things through. Well, I've never been married before. Eric felt another blush creep up his neck and he swallowed an uncomfortable laugh. Annie, really, it's honestly, completely fine. You have every reason to be weirded out by this, but it's not you. I'm just thinking about long-term stuff. Oh. Adriana blinked. Oh. You mean? Oh. This time her cheeks turned pink. Yeah. Next she snorted. Well, why didn't you say so? If you need husband advice from someone, you have my blessing. She winked and stood. Clearly she was doing her best to dispel any embarrassment between them. I'm going to get brownies. Do you want some? Eric breathed a laugh. No, I'm good. Thanks, babe. He watched her walk away and sighed when she was out of earshot. They could discuss the topic on another day when he wasn't a blushing preteen every 5 seconds. He was almost 19 for Valhalla's sake, he needed to get a grip. Troubles with the woman? A voice asked before his brother Gustav slid into the seat beside him. Eric perked with relief. Gustav. You are seriously right on time. His big brother's crooning smile broadened. And why is that? Eric's eyes darted to his fiancée, who was returning to their table. I need advice on a few things. Gustav chortled and nudged him in the ribs. I've been waiting a long time for this conversation, baby brother. I dare say I've looked forward to it. If we're both thinking of the same thing, I dare say that's entirely creepy and inappropriate. You always did have dad's wit. Gustav stood as Adriana took her seat. Come to my barn later and we'll talk. I'll be in there working on some stuff. Okay. Thanks. Eric called gratefully over his shoulder. Honestly, he already felt better. Gustav might be a tease and a bit cocky, but he'd never steered his youngest brother wrong before. As long as he didn't go into any serious details. I can't tell if you feel better or worse. Adriana commented before stuffing a brownie into her mouth. Mostly better, Eric said. I'm going to talk to him later. Okie dokie. Adriana shoved the plate across the table. Here, I brought you one anyway because I'm already fat, I don't need 6. Eric snorted. Come on, the baby likes brownies. The little chunker can calm down. Between jabbing my ribs and sitting on my bladder, I could use a vacation. And perhaps we'll get one for the wedding. Eric replied quietly, unsure if Hiccup wanted anyone to know about the edge. Do you think it's in good shape? Honestly, I have no idea. I can't imagine it's in pristine condition. Then again, your dad built most of it. I'm sure some of it's still long-standing. As long as nobody else has commandeered the island in the meantime. True, but if someone has, then we can boot them off for infiltrating Haddock property with dragons blazing, and they'd have it all nice and cozy for us. Eric said. Well, hey, I guess we'll find out tomorrow when you guys go. Adriana sighed, picking up another brownie. I wish I could go. Maybe in a couple weeks you can. Yeah, but I miss flying. Poor Lily. It's at least a little worth it when she burns Finn's butt though, right? Adriana hunched over in giggles, nearly choking on the brownie. Eric patted her shoulder as she carefully chewed, laughing alongside her at the mental image of Finn diving off Lily's back and cursing colorfully. Hiccup hadn't been too pleased with the language, but when his son literally couldn't sit for 2 days and Mara had had to give him ointment. Nothing like a tube of butt cream. Eric dissolved into snickers. He's lucky that wasn't worse. Or that it didn't scar. He gaped. How would you know? She doesn't, she's just trying to irritate me. Eric jumped, sighing in annoyance. He hated it when people crept up on him from behind. Finn's arms were already crossed. I truly love your concerns about my hiney, it's truly pristine, but if we're going tomorrow then we should go to bed early. I'm waking you all up at 4. What for? Eric whipped around as the heir walked away. Fine, 5. Make it 6 and I'll bring bacon. Finn huffed. Fine. Lazy butt. Eric blew a raspberry at his back. The island's not going anywhere. Well, you should get to Gustav's. I can manage. Adriana stood, but Eric was already up. Don't be ridiculous, I'm walking you home like I do every day. That's just because you want kisses. Eric breathed a laugh. Well, your porch kisses are to die for. I believe you started that tradition. Yes, but one of these times your dad is going to kick my butt. Probably. Then maybe this time I'll restrain myself. They strolled hand in hand out of the great hall, down the stairs, through the village and all the way to the Haddock's house. It was amazing that Adriana could walk that much during the day, but she claimed she was taking advantage of her mobility while she could still see her toes. Eric thought her baby bump was positively adorable. As her body had started changing for the baby, he wasn't oblivious to those changes. With the rapidly dropping temperature, she'd been wearing thicker sweatshirts and coats, but when he'd come to the Haddock house a few mornings ago to find her in nothing but pajama pants and a tank top, he'd forced himself to look away. The tight material across her chest had done a number on his brain. Eric gulped, forcing the thoughts away again. Adriana went up a couple steps, still holding his hand. He was about to say goodnight when she spun around and hooked a finger in his collar. What were you saying about restraining yourself? His heart instantly started pounding at the look she was giving him. God's help him, he couldn't say no. Cupping her chin, he drew her in closer, moving up a step to close the distance. Adriana's hand on his chest strayed to his shoulder as she kissed him. The kiss was firm and lingering before she began to lean away. Heart pounding, like a sailor caught in a siren's spell, he followed, kissing her more passionately than before. If he hadn't seen the victorious smirk in her eyes, he would have thought it was an innocent action. Now he vaguely wondered if she was trying to drive him insane. Soon all he could think about was her mouth and hands trailing over his shoulders and neck. He'd lost count of how many kisses they'd shared. With every kiss it only seemed to get better. Usually they were chaste, but tonight was different. He wondered if she wanted him as much as he wanted her. If she didn't want it to stop just as much as him. She threaded her fingers through the hair at his nape and pulled, drawing a moan from him that he couldn't stop. Her lips slid to his throat and he wanted more, more, more. Eric recoiled, catching Adriana's shoulders. Stop. Stop. Adriana stared up at him in surprise, but she was panting as hard as him. She reached up and smoothed out his hair. I'm sorry. No, don't be sorry. Eric sighed, rubbing his face and taking a deep breath to calm his wildly beating heart. She placed a hand on his arm when he kept his face in his hands. Her brow was probably pinched with concern, probably wondering if she'd messed up and overdone it. He didn't want her to feel guilty, he just needed to calm down. Eric forced himself to take a few deep breaths of cold air. They were quiet for nearly a minute while his heart rate slowed and he gathered his thoughts. Finally, when felt he could speak clearly, he dropped his hands. I think we need to slow down. Yeah? Adriana asked meekly. Eric took another deep breath. This is partially what I need to get advice about if I'm honest. Adriana only seemed to withdraw further. Oh. Okay. He chewed his lip. He wasn't sure what to say that would make her feel better. So, should we save kissing for the wedding day? Eric blinked. I didn't say that. Well, what do you want? Adriana asked. Because I thought you liked it. Annie, I don't like it, I love it. It's all I can think about sometimes. Eric said, probably a little too enthusiastically if her surprised expression said anything. He cleared his throat. I don't mean this in a bad way, but you drive me crazy sometimes. Oh. I mean, what I'm trying to say is we're not married yet, and when I get all riled up, it's really difficult to be innocent about it. All I want is more. Green eyes widening in realization, Adriana looked down, her cheeks going pink. Oh. Yeah. Eric rubbed the back of his neck awkwardly. He wondered how much more he could say without making the situation worse. He certainly felt like crawling under the porch and dying, and the chilly November air was making the space between them feel even farther. Adriana looked up at him through her bangs and snorted softly before poking him in the arm. Eric cracked a smile and she giggled. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make you feel bad. No, it's okay, he laughed. It's just really hard to control myself sometimes. I understand. Adriana said. There was a mischievous glint in her eye, but she resisted teasing him further. Instead she stood on tiptoes and kissed him once chastely. Go talk to your brother. Come see me before you guys leave tomorrow. Eric kissed her again, perhaps a bit more firmly this time. Maybe because he didn't want her to have any doubts that he wanted to do so. He pulled away and gave her a warm smile. See you tomorrow, Annie. Bye. He waited until she'd gone inside the house before skipping down the steps and smack. Ow. Ow. Eric winced, grinding his teeth at the pain in his knee. He glared down at his prosthetic, which had slipped on the icy ground. The door flew back open and Adriana reappeared on the porch. Oh my gods, are you okay? Yeah, just a little ice. He'd already picked himself up out of the dirt and waved to her. Bye. Don't break the other leg on the way home, Klutz. Adriana laughed. I'll be standing in our wedding, or so help me. Eric joked before continuing his journey. He heard the front door snap to a close and he hurried his steps. The temperature was dropping and Gustav had to leave for work early in the mornings. With the cold air and his quickened speed, he made it to the barn in only a few minutes. Gustav was tinkering at a work table when Eric stepped inside and slid the large door closed. The candles guttered for a short moment before sparking back to life once more. Eric rubbed his hands and blew on his fingers to warm the digits. Gustav gave him a conspiratorial smirk. So, baby brother, what did you want to talk about? Eric stepped forward, his stomach tying in knots once again. Well, a sharp pain laced up his right leg and he gasped, grabbing the table. Gustav's head snapped up. His hazel eyes shot down to the offending leg. What? With a groan, Eric hopped onto the table and pulled up his pant leg to reveal a bruise blossoming on the side of his knee. Oh well, that's just great. Gods, what happened? Slipped on a patch of ice outside the haddocks. Eric muttered, shoving the material back down in irritation. I swear, the smallest bump makes it bruise. It's going to hurt for the next week. Sorry, Gustav winced. Maybe Mara will have something. It doesn't help. Eric huffed. My leg's too sensitive. Mara had explained it time and time again. The wood chipper that had taken his leg had shredded bone, muscle and nerves. The bones had been uneven and jagged and she'd had to work tirelessly for hours to make it even. The fact that he could walk was a miracle. However, it was likely that he'd have a heightened sensitivity for the rest of his life. He wished he had Hiccup's pain tolerance and stamina. The man had been an amputee for nearly 30 years and he was still going strong. Eric wished he could be so lucky. Shaking off his frustration, Eric turned back to Gustav. Anyway, I wanted to talk about, husband stuff. You came to the right place, boyo. Gustav grinned once again. Gesturing to himself with a screwdriver, he added, for I am the husband of all husbands. The king of all charisma. The smartest, most helpful. Gustav, I specifically want to talk about Adriana. Eric interrupted. His brother would never shut up about himself if he got going. Specifically about her being pregnant and how the heck I'm supposed to. His thoughts halted. Gustav's grin only widened and Eric's heart lurched. No, not that, Gustav. Stop laughing, this isn't. Eric rubbed his face, trying not to laugh even as his brother cackled. This isn't funny. Gustav hopped up on the table next to him and shoved him in the shoulder, still laughing. Oh gods, you're hilarious when you're awkward. Sometimes I forget you're only 17. 18. Eric cried indignantly, nearly shoving him off the table. Almost 19. 18. Gustav said, hands in the air. I know what you're saying, I just couldn't resist the tease. Yeah. What am I saying then? You're worried that because she's pregnant, you'll still be a virgin until she pops, right? Eric groaned. Do you have to be so flippant? That's it though, isn't it? I mean, yeah, but no, I'm not trying to make it an issue like it's the only important thing. That's not what I'm in it for. I know that, bro, but let's be realistic about this. Gustav reasoned with an unusual air of seriousness. You're a guy, she's a girl, you love each other, these things are perfectly normal, and that's what happens when you get married. There's nothing to be ashamed of. I'm not worried about that, Eric said. The issue is that she's pregnant and I don't know what I'm going to do if she's got her hands all over me and kisses me senseless all the time. These are the things that lead one thing to another, and at a certain point, we can't exactly do anything. Gustav blinked. What do you mean, you can't? Yes you can. Eric blinked back. What? He'd managed to keep the rogue smirk away for almost a minute, but it was coming back quickly. My dearest baby brother. I'm not a baby, Gustav, stop calling me that. Well, I assumed you'd know this already. Eric made a face. What makes you assume that I would know anything about intimacy? Anne is the only girl I've ever had a serious relationship with, and yes, I am still a virgin, thank you. How am I supposed to know anything about this topic? Gustav grimaced. Good point. Okay, well, here's a little gold nugget of wisdom for you. You ready? He threw an arm over Eric's shoulders and pulled him close. When your woman is pregnant, you can, in fact, still be intimate. Eric blinked in surprise. Really? Really? Oh. Yeah, makes things easier, huh? Eric waved his hands around. Let's not talk about easier. Isn't that kinda weird? She's pregnant with. Don't mention him. Gustav said in a sudden firm voice. He's nothing but a stain on her good name and you'd do well to forget about him. You don't need to worry about that because you're the one that's marrying her and she wants to marry you. You're going to be that baby's father. Brandine doesn't carry an ounce of weight as far as this is concerned. All right. Eric nodded. As far as the intimacy stuff goes, man, honestly you just figure it out like everyone else does. Well, I figured that much. Eric mused, thinking about what he'd been told so far. So honestly, you can do that if she's pregnant. Well, I mean, use common sense. Gustav shrugged. Be careful and all. Eric pursed his lips. This had to be the weirdest conversation he'd ever had. Gustav watched him steadily. You're going to be a good husband, man. Don't stress about the details. I know, honestly I just started thinking about this stuff today. As is normal when you have a few weeks left of being single. You nervous? Eric laughed, his stomach twisting in knots at the thought. A bit. I don't know why. It's Annie. You two have been attached at the hip since you were toddlers. Gustav rolled his eyes. We've basically been honorary haddocks ever since, which gives us an advantage over the rest of the tribe. Right, because it's advantageous for you, my oldest brother, for me to marry the chief's daughter. That makes sense. No, it's because I've been in on all the secret adventures. Fighting dragon hunters and going rogue with Dager for a bit. What? Eric exclaimed. Oh, and not to mention the Edge. The Edge, now those were some good times. Wait a second, you mean to tell me that you've been to the Edge? Eric demanded. Yes. I was on Astrid's team back then, one of the lead riders. Gustav grinned. I was just a little guy back then. Learning the ropes from Hiccup and Snotlout and the gang. He frowned suddenly. Come to think of it, I don't think they enjoyed having me around very much. Well, I couldn't tell why. Perhaps because you're accident-prone and a touch annoying. Eric asked. Oh, like you're such a pleasure to be around, Squirt. People love me. The door groaned as it opened and someone entered. Eric's laughter came to a halt when his other brother Nicholas stepped inside. He looked away as Gustav slipped off the table. What's up, Nick? Mel wanted me to bring this over for the kids. She picked them up at the market today. Also, we're going to need your help at Mother's tomorrow afternoon. She has some things she needs moved around. Both of you. Eric met his eyes with a barely restrained glare. I have plans tomorrow. You don't get to decide, Nicholas hissed. With the chief, and it concerns my wedding. Eric snapped back. If you've got a problem with that, take it up with him. Guys, Gustav warned. Nicholas sniffed derisively and marched back to the door. He left without another word, slamming the door closed so hard that it bounced back open. Gustav closed it again and glared at Eric. You both need to get over it. I've got nothing to say to him. Eric remarked flatly. Eric, I'm not going to tell you what to do, Gustav said. But Dad and Dad are gone, and Mom's all we have. Mags and I think that you two need to figure it out, whether with fists or words, we don't care. But you need to get past this. He told a large portion of the village that I got Adriana pregnant. Eric bit out, his temper rising at the thought. That she ran away out of shame because she couldn't face the fact that I'd taken advantage of her and she didn't know how to deal with it. I have nothing to say to him. Gustav sighed. I know, Eric. I get it. Then just do us a favor and stay out of it. Eric muttered. He gently slid down to the ground and winced when his prosthetic touched the floor. The bruise had grown in the 10 minutes he'd been sitting. Do you want to stay here tonight? Gustav asked. We have the spare bedroom. No, that's okay, Eric sighed. Home's not that far. All right, Gustav said, pulling the door open once again. If you have more questions or whatever, let me know. I'm here for you, man. Yeah, thanks, Gustav. I don't feel quite so stupid now. Eric chortled. You're not stupid, Eric, you're 18. You'll both figure things out as you go, don't worry. All right. I'll catch you later. See you, Eric. Eric made the trek home, shivering and watching his breath cloud before him as he walked. His leg hurt like crazy and he was sure his limp was more pronounced than usual. He'd have to put some salve on it and make sure he slept on his left side tonight. When he entered the humble abode, he found Cliff hefting 2 bags onto the table. Are you back? Perfect timing. I packed you snacks and extra clothes in case you end up falling into the ocean or something. You never know when you'll need an extra pair of underwear. Eric sighed, hanging up his coat. Cliff. Bro, I'm kidding, a man never raids another man's undie drawer, that's weird. You're weird. Eric winced when he removed his boot, putting all his weight on his stump. Of course, Cliff noticed and paused his fiddling. You alright? Eric settled into the nearest chair. Yeah, just slipped on some ice earlier. The cold isn't helping. Do you want some hot cloths? I can boil some water and get the lavender from Aunt Mara. Cliff bustled into the kitchen. Eric merely hummed his response. He knew whether he said yes or no, Cliff would get him the items. He decided to endure the mothering for a few minutes before he retired to bed. He wasn't sure what time the group was actually planning to leave in the morning, but knowing Finn, he would be knocking on their door at the crack of dawn. As long as he could make it through the trip without much pain, he'd survive. "Bro, you look exhausted," Cliff commented when he emerged from the kitchen. "You should go to bed." "I will in a minute," Eric said, taking the wraps and vial of lavender and tea tree oil. "Thanks." He sighed, preparing himself for the final trek to his bedroom. "You want me to?" Eric stood, gritting his teeth against the pain. It was a simple bruise, nothing more. He didn't need help walking down a short hallway. Still, he patted Cliff on the shoulder as he limped past and soon closed the door behind him. Finn knocked on the door for the third time, huffing in impatience. His mom was preparing the dragons while his dad tied up some loose ends for the council. A small portion of them would be joining them, leaving Horst and Fishlegs in charge. Roughnut had nearly jumped at the chance to get away. Fishlegs had nearly begged Hiccup to take copious documentation on his apparent beloved rock garden. Finn had scoffed at the exchange, unsure if the man was actually serious. He lifted his fist to knock again when the door swung open. He barely stopped himself from knocking Cliff in the face. "What time is it?" Cliff muttered, rubbing his eyes. His ruddy brown curls were sticking up in all directions. "Time to go," Finn smiled in what he hoped was an adventurous grin. He thought Cliff would have been up at the crack of dawn same as him. "Are you guys ready?" Cliff said blearily. "No." Indignation flared in his chest. "Come on, you guys aren't excited." Cliff sighed. Well, he was up half the night in pain, so. Finn blinked. His leg slipped on some ice last night. Oh. He chewed his lip in thought. Is he coming? Leaning against the door frame, Cliff sighed again. "I don't know. He's pretending like it's not a big deal, but you know how he gets." Finn looked down the street, feeling that old guilt rise up. Every time Eric's leg injury flared up, he couldn't help but feel responsible. If he'd just stayed in that stupid cell like he was supposed to. "Finn, stop beating yourself up. We can't change it. It's my fault he has to deal with this," Finn murmured. "His sensitivity is so high, it never healed as well as my dad's leg did. How long can we expect him to have mobility?" Cliff huffed. "Stop overthinking it. It's not your burden to bear and he doesn't like people worrying about it. He'll deal with it just like he has been. Besides, it's only the cold weather that's making it worse." With an annoyed huff, Finn stepped off the front step. "Well, go find out if he's coming or not. We won't hold it against him if he can't." "Right." The door closed without further ado. Finn turned away, feeling agitated. He walked down the street to Ben the baker's to pick up a few pastries before returning to the hatchery. That's where his parents had decided to meet with the rest of the group before taking off. Adriana was there as well, bundled up in warm clothes. Normally she'd never be seen before 9 in the morning, but she'd insisted on being woken before everyone left. Now he wasn't sure if she'd even needed to get up so early, not if Eric stayed home. Frustrated with his younger self and all the stupid choices he'd made, Finn turned sharply at the next corner and nearly plowed into someone. He and the girl skidded to a halt, and it took him a moment to realize it was Inga. Her face brightened. "Do you always march around like you own the place, or do you only look where you're going half the time?" Inga asked. Sorry, I was a bit distracted." "A bit? I'd say you have your mind on more than just sweet rolls," she said, glancing at the paper bag in his hand. "Yeah." Finn tapered off. Glancing over her head toward the hatchery doors just a few yards away, he sidestepped. "Sorry, I have to be somewhere." "Meeting with everyone who's going to this mystery place?" Inga asked cheerily, following him down the street. "My dad's going too. Insisted on going under threat of mutiny, I heard. Said something about his big red S. Whatever that means." "So you're seeing him off?" Finn asked tersely. He kept his eyes forward as he walked, even though she didn't break stride with him. "Well yes, him too, I guess. Finn ground to a halt and exhaled through his nose, trying to put a leash on his temper. He'd been avoiding this conversation for so long and it was starting to get ridiculous. As he'd been warned, it was only getting worse. He should have addressed this a long time ago. Inga seemed to sense his inner struggle, though she remained tactless as usual. Too much. Praying to the gods for patience and kindness, Finn turned to her. Inga, do you like me? Her blue eyes widened and darted to the side. What? Inga. One of the reasons I value you as a friend is that you're the most nonsensical girl I know. So just tell me honestly, do you like me? She swallowed and nervously met his eyes. Yes. I've liked you for a long time. Finn chewed the inside of his cheek. He realized he was gripping his arm so tightly against this chest that his fingertips were turning white and the paper bag was crinkling in offense. He forced himself to relax, took a deep breath and exhaled. Okay. Okay what? Inga asked. Is that a good okay or a bad okay? His heart twisted guiltily. As gently as he could manage, he replied, I can't change your feelings. But I also can't reciprocate them. The hope in her face fell almost instantly, as did his heart. He suddenly felt like the most horrible person in the world. He looked down at his boots. I don't want to hurt you but, the way you flirt with me and try so hard to do everything with me, it makes me a little uncomfortable. I really enjoy being your friend. Gods, what was he even saying? Tears were brewing in her eyes now and her face was turning a splotchy red. I'm sorry, Inga. But I don't like you that way. Though her tears didn't fall, he could tell she was struggling. He knew avoiding this conversation for so long would only make it harder on her. He should have nipped it in the bud months ago, but instead he'd had to sit on the fence and think on it. Thinking had only fueled her hope that she'd have a chance. That maybe he'd actually given her real consideration. She was intuitive and smart, she had to know that he had thought about it. But he couldn't get over the fact that he was an adult and she wasn't. It didn't feel right. Maybe someday she would have that chance, he didn't know the future. But right now, he just wished he was more eloquent than he was. That he could say something to take that heartbroken look off her face. Without another word, Inga covered her face and strode past him. Finn's heart twisted in his chest. He wanted to turn around and call her back, apologize for making her cry. He truly felt sorry. However, at the same time, he couldn't help but feel a small amount of relief. It was done. Maybe they could both move on, rebuild their friendship after she had some time. Maybe if he was still single in a few years. With a long sigh, Finn continued the walk to the hatchery. Hopefully the edge would be much less complicated than his relationship problems. Hiccup surveyed their group as he shoved a few extra pieces of parchment into his saddlebag. Toothless wiggled impatiently, roaring up at Stormfly and Zap. The bag was already stuffed to the top, so why he expected anything else to fit was a bit silly. Still he shoved it inside next to the notebooks and blueprints. He winced when he heard the crisp tearing of paper. Rough Nut and Tough Nut were already sitting on Buff and Belch near the gates. Clearly they hadn't taken a flight together for quite some time and were itching to get back in the skies. Snotlout was chatting with Astrid, whining about the early hour. Finn stood leaning against a large oak desk, glaring at the stone floor. When he'd entered the passage a few minutes ago, his face had been red as if in embarrassment. He'd have to ask his son why when there were less ears. Adriana hummed impatiently in her seat nearby. Are they coming or what? They'll be a bit late. Finn responded in a distracted tone. Hiccup frowned. Something was definitely bothering him. Instead of voicing his thoughts, he asked, running behind. They were up late was the only reply. Hiccup met Adriana's eyes, they both seemed to read through Finn's vague responses. Something was up. Their answer limped in a few minutes later. Eric's face was pale but he held his head high as he entered the room. Cliff entered a few steps behind him, his brow creased. He seemed to be watching Eric closely. The young man in question walked to Adriana and bent to kiss her forehead, but Hiccup's eyes were on his leg. He hadn't limped that badly in quite some time. Eric straightened and glared in Hiccup's direction, daring him to say a word. Hiccup turned instead to the group. We're all here. Saddle up. Toothless warbled happily when he mounted and gestured toward the guards to open the gates. As the wheels turned, Hiccup noticed the hushed argument coming from the young couple. He knew he should ignore it, but he couldn't help lifting his head to the side just a little. Shouldn't be going. I'm fine, it's just a bruise. A fall like that isn't. It's not a big deal. Eric growled, loud enough for most of the group to hear. Finn stiffened in his saddle. Snotlout muttered from his place on Hook Fang, "You going to let him talk to your daughter like that? They'll work it out." Hiccup muttered back. "If a boy talked to my girl like that, I'd—" "Shut up, Snotlout." Hiccup wasn't trying to be rude, but he was trying to listen. "I shouldn't take it out on you. Babe, if you're in that much pain then. Annie, this is my life. I can't sit around and do nothing every time it hurts. It hurts all the time. I have to just deal with it." A tired sigh. "Honestly, I packed tonics. I'll be fine." A brief moment of hesitation. "Okay. Be careful." Snotlout was drumming his fingers on Hook Fang's horns. "If we have to wait for them to snog for 10 minutes. "Shut up, Snotlout." Astrid reprimanded. Hiccup watched Eric mount Charger from the corner of his eye. His movements were a little stiff, but he still didn't comment. He met the boy's eyes a moment later in silent question. Eric nodded wordlessly. "All right people, let's go." Together as a group, they flew out of the hatchery toward the sea. By the time they left Burke, Finn had long forgotten about Inga. Coupled with the cold air and the sea spray hitting his face, he found himself relaxing and forgetting all his woes as every flight seemed to do. The usual tension in his parents evaporated within minutes of leaving Burke, and they were soon bantering and flying around each other like a couple of kids. Some of Eric's color had returned with the cold air. His easygoing smile was back as he chatted with Cliff, who was leaning so far in his saddle Finn thought he might fall. Thankfully Bill, also known as Edna Louise Sacramento III, seemed to have a good handle on her rider's clumsy tendencies. It didn't take nearly as long to fly to the island as he'd expected. When they saw the speck of land on the horizon and the dragons began to pump their wings in renewed excitement, Finn urged Zap forward. The Shockjaw obliged. She seemed just as excited to see this new island as he was. When they arrived, he couldn't hide his surprise. If he'd been paying attention, he'd have seen the same expressions on Eric and Cliff's faces. Built above the harbor into the craggy outcropping and into the forestry was a fort. Multiple buildings in various styles and faded colors stood out in various spots. The foliage seemed to press closely to the buildings, attesting to the fact that the area had been uninhabited for quite some time. But Finn could clearly see the layout for a well-designed base. "Home sweet home," Hiccup said, grinning. Toothless roared his excitement and dove without warning, nearly yanking the chief out of the saddle. If Hiccup hadn't been riding for most of his life, he might have fallen. The rest of the group followed at a quick pace. Toothless and the other dragons hovered over the wooden boards, the dragons sniffing. "What are they doing?" Cliff asked. "Making sure the wood isn't rotted," Hiccup stated. "Oh, good. Wouldn't do to lose a leg." Cliff laughed, then slapped a hand over his mouth. Finn didn't have to look to know Eric was restraining a glare. Toothless and Stormfly touched down, seemingly deeming it safe. The others joined them and dismounted. Finn turned in a circle, surveying the large brown building they'd stopped in front of and the blue one nearby. Stormfly was already tramping toward the blue one. Astrid punched her husband on the arm before running after her dragon. Snotlout and Hook Fang sauntered off, the former talking about his humble abode fit for kings. "So?" Eric asked, gingerly dismounting. "Were all the tail flaps necessary on the roof, or were you trying to make that fly too?" "Ha ha," Hiccup asked, ignoring Rough Nut and Tough Nut's loud ooh in the background. He looked up at the roof and winced. Only a few of them were intact. "I guess I was a little overzealous with the design. But what can I say, I was 17. "Well, it could be worse," Eric said, walking toward the doorway and casting Finn a dimpled smirk. "You could always have the personality of a doorknob." "Yoo-hoo!" Rough Nut and Tough Nut roared, falling out of their saddles in laughter. Finn glared back but couldn't fight the amused grin fighting its way onto his face. He knew what Eric was doing. He was making up for this morning's frustration with jokes. Regrettably at Finn's expense. Well, two could play at that game. Careful, Blondie, Finn said, helping to push the door open. Insults do not a friendship make. Besides, I'd rather not kick your butt. We'll save it for later then. When they finally managed to get the rusted door open, they stepped into the dark, dusty room. Toothless instantly began sniffing around while Hiccup turned in a circle, clearly reminiscing. Finn and Eric and Cliff walked around the room, looking through all the tools and trinkets and old yellowed papers strewn about the room. Just as messy as your desk now. Finn murmured. Old habits die hard. Cliff lifted up a large ceramic jar and peered inside. Is it weird to you that you were our age when you built this place? He pulled out the cork with a loud thunk. And here you are showing us this place after all this time. A bit, yeah. Hiccup said, eyes narrowing at the jar. What's? Hey, what's this green stuff? Hiccup suddenly lurched forward. Don't touch it. Cliff flung his hand toward the ceiling, grey eyes wide. What is it? Taking the jar, Hiccup looked inside and withheld a sigh. Changeling poison. Why the heck do you have a jar of changeling poison? Cliff demanded. Don't you realize somebody could have touched that? Hiccup raised an eyebrow. Cliff grinned. Sorry. Yes, Hiccup said, swirling the poison around. I do believe Rough and Tough volunteered to see how much poison the other could endure. Wow, Finn winced. How come they aren't scarred? Or, you know, are they just in hard-to-reach places, if you know what I mean? Oh, Cliff. Eric sighed. 'Cause anyone would just volunteer to have their buns singed off. Finn chuckled. They would. Cliff laughed. To answer the question, Hiccup plucked the cork out of the teen's hand and put it back in the jar. Because I wouldn't allow it. Don't get any ideas, Cliff. Hey, I'm curious, but I'm not stupid. Cliff held up his hands. Green and sticky. No touchy. A roar of rage and despair echoed across the island. Cliff perked and poked his head outside. Hiccup sighed. Some things never change. Let's go see which part of Snotlout's king house was raided. A short walk later and they found Snotlout shaking Tough Nut by the collar. Where is it? Where? I don't know. Tough Nut wailed, though by his wild grin he seemed to be enjoying it. Hiccup slapped Snotlout's hands away. Tough Nut dropped like a stone. Cut it out, Snotlout, this place has been empty for almost 20 years. What makes you think Tough Nut came all the way out here to steal, whatever it is you think he stole? It was only a matter of time. Snotlout hissed. I'd always see him snickering and plotting, just watching and waiting for the day I'd turn my back. Now it's gone and it had to be him. What's gone? Hiccup sighed. Oh, of course, a wise chiefly one, you're sharp but not that sharp, Snotlout growled. Or else you would have noticed already. Hiccup and the boys turned their gaze up toward the large red hut. Nothing seemed to be out of the ordinary, at least to Finn. Except he saw the slight change in his dad's posture. The shift that said, "Are you kidding me? Is something supposed to be in the middle?" Eric asked. Thank you. Snotlout shouted, scaring a few birds out of the nearby trees. See, the blondie gets it. You'll need him around when you go into your retirement. He can tell you where the roads are and where the sky is. Why? Eric glanced at Finn, unsure. Why would I tell him any of those things? Because they are plainly obvious and you'd have to spell it out for his chiefliness, Snotlout said in a fake sweet voice. Because obviously you're the only one who's noticed that my wonderfully glorious S is missing from the doorway. Finn looked up at the building again. There's supposed to be an S in the doorway. Oh, Burke is hopeless. Snotlout muttered. Yes, your princeliness, there's supposed to be a giant S in the doorway that's almost as tall as you. Finn snickered. Oh, I seriously doubt that. Or does it just seem like that in your very old age that the thing you remember so fondly is as tall as your lifelong competitor's son, who's actually a lot taller than you? Hiccup coughed. Eric was clearly trying not to smile, but Cliff was snorting and chuckling into his hands. Snotlout's face slowly turned puce as he stood there glaring. "How'd you like to hang from the doorway, fearless Finn? Don't lay a finger on my precious son, Snotlout, or I'll break your arm." Astrid sauntered in from around the corner. Cliff snorted louder as Snotlout gasped. "Wait, did you hear what he just said to me? Oh, you haddocks are a bunch of... You know, Snotlout, maybe you should spend less time attacking people and find your S. It's got to be around here somewhere," Hiccup said, gesturing to the surrounding woods. After a moment of indecision, Snotlout stomped to the stairs, muttering under his breath along the way. Hookfang chortled as he followed. When his tail disappeared, Hiccup cast a long-suffering look at his wife. "Honestly, it's like we never left." "You're telling me? There's tons of stuff in my hut I never came back for. Guess I just forgot." Finn rolled his eyes. "Come on, you got distracted by me and Anna. It's okay to say." "Well, it was more than that." Astrid shrugged. "We grew up. We moved on." Eric shoved his hands deep into his coat pockets. The wind seemed to be coming in harder from the ocean. "So where would we have the actual ceremony and party?" "This way." Astrid turned and led the way. For the next hour the boys got a tour of the edge with Hiccup and Astrid. They discussed wedding plan ideas while Eric took notes for Adriana, and the boys listened to the couple's banter and stories with equally rapt attention. When it was well past noon and Finn realized he was starving, he whistled for Zap at the edge of the platform outside the clubhouse. As the group ate, they continued discussing options for the fast-approaching wedding. Finn noted that should they decide to do it here, they needed to get started on clearing some of the trees and brush. Hiccup agreed and promised to rally a team of people to start work effective immediately. Even if Adriana didn't want to do the wedding here, there's no reason they couldn't clean it up a bit and put the fort to use once more. "Do you think she'll like it?" Eric asked. "It's not like she can come here until the actual day." Hiccup looked around the clubhouse. "I think she will, once we get it cleaned up and decorated. It's a new location she's never been before. She doesn't have any bad memories that took place here and the guests will be limited. She won't have to worry about party crashes. It's beautiful, and surprisingly held together very well. We can set up which hut can be for the men and the ladies to get ready, and have the ceremony in here. Ben and the cooks can bring out the food after that." He shrugged, looking to Astrid. "It feels good to me. What do you think, Mom?" "I agree. We can decorate it to look exactly how she'd want it." Astrid waved a hand to the pillars looming overhead. "She'll be surprised, and like you said, I think she'll enjoy and appreciate a nice day or two away from Burke. She certainly deserves it." Eric looked around once more before nodding. "Okay. I like it too." "Hooray!" Cliff cheered. "So now we go home and tell Annabelle the whole story." "Yes, let's do that," Hiccup said, standing and preparing to douse the fires. In that moment, Snotlout shuffled in. Leaves and twigs were sticking from his shirt and hair, his face set in a sullen scowl. "No luck?" Astrid asked cheerily. "Our whittle Snotty Potty washed his s, or ooh." Rough Nut sniffed, blue eyes wide and lips pooching. In order to keep his laughter to himself, Finn stepped outside. He double-checked his saddlebags with Zap and grabbed his water skin to refill. As he made his way to the nearest, thankfully still good well, he observed the geography of the island. How his parents and their friends had managed to construct buildings on top of rock formations, and how they were still standing after all this time. He doubted he could do that. He could build it if he had plans and help, but he knew he didn't have quite the brains to make that kind of blueprint. As he filled his water skin, he found that he liked the edge and hoped his sister agreed to their thoughts and plans. A wedding away from Burke would be fun. His sister deserved to have no problems on the best day of her life, and he was determined to give it to her. Nobody would mar her wedding day, and from here on out, he resolved that her life would only get better. Chapter 30, Larson at last. Chapter text. On any normal day, Eric didn't fidget. He didn't get nervous very often, and he didn't worry himself with other people's opinions enough to feel uncomfortable. Today, however, he was a nervous wreck, sweaty hands, butterflies in his stomach, heart beating wildly. He kept telling himself to calm down, get a grip. Today was no different than any other day. Except the very important detail that he was getting married. He exhaled heavily in the attempt of dispersing the nervous flutters in his stomach. He was getting married. He'd never been so nervous before, not even while planning his engagement. He stared at his reflection while straightening his white shirt once again. It was loose-fitting, not a style he usually wore, but hey, that's what Adriana had picked. Does this look right? Eric turned as Cliff emerged from the main bedroom. They were preparing for the big day in Hiccup's old bunker on the edge, just as Adriana and the girls were in Astrid's. Thankfully each hut was large enough to hold all occupants and their belongings, plus dragons. Cliff was also fidgeting with his shirt sleeves. Grandma Ingerman had hemmed each and every item of clothing herself with Taryn and Morgan's help. Cliff's clothes alone had taken time to make, seeing as he was both taller and skinnier than the other boys, barring Finn. However, the loose white shirt combined with the deep blue vest gave Cliff a very mature look. Now if only he was wearing pants. I mean, you're missing a few things. Eric gestured to his friend's lower half, thankfully covered by the long white shirt tail and undershorts. But the upper half looks good. Ha ha, Cliff grinned, adjusting the vest in the mirror. I might take this off again so I don't get hot, but I think this is how it's supposed to look. I think. He narrowed his eyes, reaching up to touch his hair. Don't, Eric warned. If Taryn finds you started messing with your hair, she'll kill you. Ugh, I can't help it. Cliff whined. I'm always touching my hair. One day Eric insisted. You can handle not playing with it for one day. His best friend had a bad habit of messing with his curly locks throughout the day. It was so thick and coarse, he could usually style it any which way he pleased, sometimes he could even make it frizz into a large puffy mane around his head. Taryn had forbidden him from doing any such thing today, however, so much so in fact that she'd purchased a gel from Johan's ship specifically for her boyfriend. She'd made him wash his hair that morning, and when he'd re-emerged from the bathing room, she'd put the gel in herself. Now his brown locks were kept in organized waves around his face. It feels crusty. Cliff gave his head an experimental shake. Like it's stuck. I think that's the point, Eric said, adjusting his sleeves again in the mirror. At least leave it until the after party, then you can make it stand on end all you like. Something tells me Annie won't care either. Okay. Cliff grinned. He grabbed Eric's vest lying on a nearby chair. Here. Eric grimaced. Not ready yet. I don't want to feel restricted. It's not restricting, it's actually quite slimming. As if you need any more slimming, Cliffy. Finn drawled as he ambled out of the other room. You're already a beanpole. Eric blinked in surprise even as Cliff whistled. Wow, you clean up real nice. Looking in the mirror, Finn straightened his own vest. The deep blue made his hair and eyes pop, while the brown pants and the knee-high leather boots made him look taller. Eric wondered if it wasn't Finn's wedding day. Dude, the girls are gonna faint. Cliff snickered. Finn rolled his eyes. They can faint all they like, it's not my day. It's Eric and Anna's. Regardless, you look really good, Finn. Eric smirked. Who knows, maybe you'll end up with a girlfriend by the end of the night. Nobody's going to be looking at me. I'm just trying to keep Snotlout from splitting my head open, Finn muttered, lifting a foot onto a chair to adjust his boot. Fine, fine, whatever you say. Cliff raised his hands. You may not care, but those girls certainly will, that's all we're saying. Before Finn could reply, the front door opened and Hiccup strolled in. Okay boys, we're right on schedule. We're an hour away from. He paused, green eyes taking them all in. Well, other than Cliff's lack of pants. Oh. Cliff gasped and darted into the bedroom. Finn and Eric snickered as Hiccup joined them, looking each over with a careful eye. He began adjusting Finn's vest before his hands were shaken off. Dad, it's fine. If not me, it'll be your mom. After a brief moment, Hiccup's eyes took on a solemn look. Ah, Finn, you look like a chief. Finn ducked his head awkwardly. Eric gave his friend a wan smile, knowing he didn't know how to take comments like that yet. The moment passed and Hiccup slapped his son on the shoulder. Off you get. however, he said, turning to Eric with a critical eye that made him gulp. Are not nearly ready. Finn marched toward the door without another word. Hey, where's he going? Eric asked. He wasn't sure if he wanted to be left alone with his soon-to-be father-in-law and Cliff. As if reading Eric's mind, Finn turned a smirk over his shoulder. Crowd control. Then he was gone. Hiccup snatched up Eric's vest and held it out. Come on, kiddo. Time waits for no man. Finn's first task was to check on the girls. Make sure they had food and drinks, see if everything was going according to plan with the cooks and party organizers. It had taken a couple weeks, but with a few organized teams, the edge had become something new entirely. Gnarly weeds and scraggly trees had been torn down and used for firewood, each bunker scrubbed top to bottom, and the clubhouse decorated. Flowers had been imported from Johann, Finn had seriously doubted, but as always, the old trader had pulled through. Tables and chairs had been brought in from Berk by ship, the cook and his workers had pulled out all the stops and had been cooking a feast since dawn. Nearly 6 ships had arrived mid-morning with guests. While the Haddocks still had some skeptics back on Berk, the majority of the hooligans had come prepared with gifts and well wishes to celebrate this happy day. Friends from other villages had come too. Kara from Braun had brought a ship of villagers, as well as 3 ships from Bogburglar Island. Finn was sure he could hear kamikaze even from this distance. Even a small delegation of Jut showed up, led by Ivan and Kiev Sullivan. He hadn't expected such a turnout, but then again, the chief of Berk's daughter was getting married. Finn was glad his dad had remembered the edge. To have a new location away from the skeptics to celebrate his sister and Eric's marriage. The thought made him happy. He jogged up the steps toward the girls' bunker and rapped his knuckles on the door. Looking toward the clubhouse, he could see the crowd of people, some sitting in chairs and others talking in groups. It was almost time. He gulped nervously. He'd have to stand up in front of all those people. He sure was glad it wasn't his wedding day. Then again, Eric and Cliff seemed pretty insistent that people would be looking at him, not Eric. Naturally, they'd be paying more attention to the happy couple, especially Anna, right? He raised his hand to knock again when Helga's muffled voice sounded, "Speak, friend, and enter." "Friend." Finn replied with a smirk. The door swung open and she reached outside to drag him in without another word. Finn cast his eyes to the floor when he heard the gaggle of giggling girls around him. "Relax, Finn, everybody's decent." Helga chortled. "I'm no perv." Finn laughed, looking around. Tarin, her long auburn hair up in a twist at the back of her head, was finishing Astrid's hair at a mirror. Grandma Ingerman and Morgan were supposed to be here, though Adriana was also nowhere to be found. Tarin and Helga wore matching dresses the color of soft lilac. Finn blinked at the sight of Helga in a dress, much less with her hair pinned up, curled tresses framing her face. Only for Adriana Helga winked. Finn glanced down at himself. Ditto. Astrid's knee was bobbing furiously as Tarin worked. Finally, the last strand of golden hair pinned, the girl stepped away with a satisfied sigh. "You look lovely, Mrs. Haddock." "Oh please." Astrid stood. "Call me Astrid, Tarin, or else." She turned and froze at the sight of her son. Her hands rose to rest on her chest. "Oh Finn." Finn couldn't help the smile. "Oh Mom, don't give me that look." Even Tarin was beaming. "Finn, you look amazing." "No, stop, I won't hear any more about me, you girls look better than I ever could." Finn said calmly, trying not to blush. Astrid had walked forward and was indeed straightening his clothes just as his dad had predicted. She also combed out his hair with her fingers, even though he knew it was fine. Once satisfied, she stepped back and stared up at him. Her crystal blue eyes turned glassy. "Oh, my babies aren't babies anymore." "God's Mom, stop." Finn laughed. The girls were grinning madly, clearly amused by his discomfort. Astrid abruptly cleared her throat. "Enough of that. Where's your sister?" "Adriana." Finn rubbed his ear as his mom marched toward the closed door across the room. "We're on a schedule. Are you ready yet?" Grandma Ingerman's jovial voice echoed through the wood separating them. "Almost, dearie, almost. Oh, she looks just ravishing, wait until you see." Finn looks ravishing too, Helga commented with a roguish smirk. Shut up, Bones, Finn replied. We'll be tearing through mud pits soon enough and you'll forget you ever said such a horrible thing. Who says a girl can't enjoy the view? Taryn rolled her eyes. Ah, you guys are gross. Finn lifted his hands. Hey, I'm an innocent party in all this. I was handed a pile of clothes and told to put them on. It's not my fault everyone's made it their mission to get me a girl. The door opened, closing their conversation. Everyone turned to see Morgan emerge from the back room, grinning triumphantly. Adriana stepped out carefully to a chorus of oaths from the girls. Where Hiccup had managed to find her address in the dead of winter and how the women had been able to adjust it so her baby bump wouldn't hinder the fit. Adriana's hair was up in a beautiful twist, braids intertwined. Her green eyes were bright and excited, as if she'd waited for this moment for a long time. She stepped into the room, Grandma Ingerman straightening her train as she walked. Astrid held her daughter's shoulders gently, smiling with such pride. Oh Audrey. Now, don't start with the waterworks, Adriana giggled. She looked past her mom directly at Finn, and he couldn't help it. His eyes started to burn. He gestured her forward for a hug, which she accepted with great enthusiasm. Ooh. The girls cooed around them. Finn hugged his twin tightly, ignoring the others, careful not to squeeze her too tightly or mess up her hair. She smelled like lavender and lemon, she seemed so small in his arms, yet he knew in so many ways, she was stronger than he'd ever been. He pulled back and found her struggling not to tear up. Gently he kissed her forehead. You look beautiful, Annie. Thanks, Adriana suddenly grinned. You too. Finn and the girls laughed then, unable to restrain themselves. He was grateful for the joke, it made any tears that had wanted to fall disappear, though he was sure his face was a nice splotchy red now. He sighed, hugging her one more time. Are you ready? Adriana sighed. I'm ready. Good. How's Eric? She asked pensively. Nervous, Finn smirked. Better question, how's Cliff? Taryn asked, perhaps a little stiffly. Has he messed up his hair yet? Nah, he's waiting for you to do that later. Finn said. Astrid slapped his arm as Taryn's face went red. Kidding. Though he was missing pants the last time I saw him. Oh gods. Taryn sighed. Oh. Adriana suddenly exclaimed. I almost forgot. Morgan, can you get the flour? Oh gods. Morgan darted back into the other room. Rustling and muttering could be heard for a moment before she ran back in. Here. Thank you. Adriana took the purple flower and looked up at her brother. Finn. Yes. Eric made this for me. It was one of the gifts on our engagement day. She smiled down at the flower in her hand before meeting his eyes. The border around the flowers, it spells Benen. Finn's heart twisted. Really? He bent to see the flower better and sure enough in Eric's neat stitching was Benen's name. I wanted to remember him today, Adriana continued. The necklace he gave me doesn't match the color scheme. But this does. So. I wanted you to put it in my hair. Eh? Finn blinked. He'd never, ever put something in his sister's hair before. Well, certainly not something that belonged. Adriana's green eyes widened and her lower lip stuck out. Please. Finn sighed. Don't you think a nice, slimy frog? Finn. Come on, you know I'm kidding, he grinned, gently taking the flower. Turn around. Taryn. Their friend was already there, helping Finn find the perfect place to add the flower to her hair. Finn was terrified his giant sausage fingers would destroy the perfect coils, but surprisingly they added the flower with no damage done. Adriana turned and gave him another hug before he could straighten back to his full height. Thank you. She whispered. Finn held her tight. You're welcome. A sharp knocking sounded on the door outside. After letting his sister go, Finn roughly rubbed his face and glanced at Helga, silently asking if he looked okay. She gave him a firm nod and a hearty thumbs up as Astrid peeked outside and grabbed the visitor. It turned out to be Hiccup, who of course had slapped a hand over his eyes. Is everybody decent? Helga sighed. Oh, you haddock men are so pure. Cracking his fingers apart, Hiccup glanced around and dropped his hand. Adriana was hiding behind Finn. She could hear her soft snickering at the sound of Hiccup's spluttering. The wedding's in 20 minutes. Where's Addie? Relax, Dad, I think she's more ready than you are. Finn smiled and stepped aside. Hiccup's face went slack in awe, almost wonder at the sight of Adriana's beaming face, standing in the foyer in her wedding dress, positively glowing. Oh, Addie. Finn took that as his cue to leave. There were a few things he still needed to take care of, and he was more than positive that his sister and Dad wanted a few minutes alone. Plus he sure as heck didn't want to cry again. Astrid, Grandma Ingerman and the girls seemed to read his thoughts. They filed out of the room after he did, leaving Hiccup and Adriana alone. He'd be walking her down to the clubhouse for the ceremony soon. The rest of them had to get over there to line up. Heart in his throat, Finn led the women down the ramp and toward the stairs. He wasn't even the one getting married, yet his heart was thundering. Not to mention he was starting to get hungry, which was only making him queasy. He exhaled, as excited as he was ready for it to be over. Helga elbowed him in the ribs. Smile up there. Surprised, Finn looked at her smirking face. Why? Because Finn, Helga said. Your sister is getting married and you look positively dashing. Seriously, smile. At her flat tone, Finn couldn't help but comply with the shake of his head. Helga grinned in triumph. There it is. Hiccup couldn't believe his eyes. From the first moment he'd held her in his arms and she'd cried that very first time, he'd always hoped and dreamed this day would come. His baby girl was getting married today. She was wearing the dress he'd custom ordered with Johann. He'd told the old trader that no matter what it took, no matter what price, he'd pay it. For his baby girl, everything had to be perfect. So far everything was perfect. Now standing in the foyer looking at his baby girl, no, the beautiful young woman she'd grown to be, he knew she was ready. Adriana fiddled with the material hanging from her hips, perhaps a bit awkwardly if her downcast eyes were any indication. The delicate beading caught the light as she moved. Coupled with her braided hair, makeup and purple flowers, she was a vision. I hope Finn is ready to catch Eric when he falls, Hiccup said softly. Adriana giggled, some of her shyness melting away. She didn't usually dress up. She hadn't really worn skirts since. But she looked beautiful and as always, Grandma Ingerman worked wonders on the dress. He couldn't believe how time had flown. Wasn't she just toddling around the house? Wasn't she just learning how to talk? Didn't she just find Lily and bring her home? Wasn't he just painting flowers on her bedroom walls while she sang in the background? Didn't they just bake mint chocolate chip cookies? Somehow Eric had weaseled his way into their lives and won her heart. Everything would be different after today. He wished he could turn back time, relive some of those good times, change the bad, at least have made her life easier and eased some of her pain. But no. She was all the more stronger for all the pain she'd endured. For as much as she grew up believing he was the strongest man in her life, she had to be stronger than him. Her kindness, her grace, her mercy. She'd always been stronger. When Adriana giggled again, he realized he was staring, caught up in reminiscing and reflecting. He blinked out of his reverie and brushed a stray hair out of her eyes. Are you ready? Adriana sighed, but she was beaming. Yes. Good. Hiccup replied. There was so much he wanted to say. He swallowed hard against the lump growing in his throat. Addie. He reached up to brush her cheek. She too looked like she was trying not to choke up. Yes. Baby, I'm so proud of you. After everything, you're still happy. You chose to be happy, to find someone to spend your life with. To help you take care of this baby. Your mom and I love you so much and we are so proud. I don't want you to ever forget that. Adriana waved at her face and took a deep breath. I won't, she whispered. Not ever. I love you too. Reaching up to hug him this time, he felt his insides crushing, almost as if they were saying goodbye forever. It wasn't goodbye, this was a happy day, and he was forever thankful that the boy she'd chosen was just as kind and generous. He knew that she would be better by Eric's side. That it was time to let her go and let her start this next chapter of her life. Releasing him, she sniffed and gently wiped her tears away. Still, she was beaming. She was happy. That alone made him happy and made all of his pain of letting her go worth it. Even if he was never happy again, it was worth it to see her happy. Hiccup took a long, steadying breath. "Ready, Miss Haddock?" Adriana giggled and took his arm. "Ready." If he was nervous getting ready, he was sure as heck nervous now. Eric peeked out the cracked door once more at the large group of people sitting down in chairs and benches, getting a front row seat for his wedding. Gods, his wedding. "Bruh, stop stressing," Cliff said from his nearby chair. Eric turned away from the door, exhaling heavily and pacing the room. He resisted the urge to play with his hair just as he was sure Cliff was. Yet Cliff wasn't getting married. In fact, he looked positively ill at ease, for once, leaning back in his chair and smiling happily. "What if I'm not ready for this?" he muttered, stopping in the middle of the room. Cliff's grey eyes darted to meet his. "Eric, nobody is more qualified to be her husband than you." "It's not about qualified, I just..." Eric huffed, staring down at his shoe and newly shined prosthetic. His thoughts were in a whirl. He met Cliff's eyes again. "I don't want to mess this up." Cliff's chair legs dropped to the floor and he stood. "She's already been through so much, what if we're taking this too fast?" "Bruh, you're going to mess it up," Cliff said calmly. "You are not going to make her happy every single day. You're going to screw it up sometimes. Just as she's going to screw it up for you." Eric sighed, nodding in agreement. He knew this. "That's where commitment comes in, doesn't it?" Cliff asked. "When one of you gets hurt by the other, no matter how ticked off either of you gets or you say something that hurts the other's feelings, you still choose to stay with them. You don't abandon them. You don't jump ship and start going out with someone else, because you made a promise to her, just as she made a promise to you. That's what marriage is, right? It's a promise. I know you more than anyone else, and I know for a fact that you'd sooner die than abandon her. If that was the case, you would have done it by now." Slowly, Eric's fear began to ebb away. He met Cliff's eye and nodded. "You're right." Cliff's face twitched as if he wanted to make a joke, but he finished his point. "Stop doubting yourself. Nobody is perfect. You're going to fail sometimes, and as long as you apologize and do your absolute best to do better, it's okay. Stay committed to her, as you always have been. Gods know she's committed to you." Eric took a long, steadying breath. "Thanks, Cliff. Thanks for everything. Our friendship started out pretty rocky. Sometimes I really think I should have left you on that puny rowboat. And leave me to be eaten alive by sharks. You wouldn't." Cliff grinned. "Oh bruh, it's your wedding day." He grabbed Eric around the waist and lifted him up in the tightest squeeze hug he'd ever received. Eric pounded him on the back and gasped when finally released. He landed on his good leg for good measure. Wouldn't do to be in pain up there. He straightened his tunic just as Cliff straightened his. They sighed and turned simultaneously as Horst and Gobber walked into the room, grinning excitedly. "It's time, boys," Horst said. Gobber nudged Eric in the ribs with his elbow, wedding bell attachment chiming on his prosthetic limb. "Knock 'em dead." There were so many people. Finn hadn't anticipated so many people coming, and yet, there they were. Men, women and children from all over the archipelago. When the family had been counting returned invitations the last few weeks, it had been a big number. Well, he was convinced people had lied because there were a heck of a lot more people than he'd envisioned. He hoped Ben the baker and the cooks had planned for enough food. Vikings could eat a lot, and a wedding was no small affair. Nearly 100 Burkians had come for the special occasion. That alone was a great number. A good portion of Burke hadn't come due to disinterest, but many stayed to watch children for the day so parents like Fishlegs and Roughnut could come. That number, however, was nothing on the fellow tribes. Kara the Kind of Brawn had come with 3 ships strong. Her brother Sven of Berserker Island, to whom Hiccup had given the islands after the duel, had also come with a ship. Millie the Frilly, whose parents had died when she was a child and was still the youngest chief to date, also came with a ship of her own. Even the Sullivans of Jut had come with a single ship. However, kamikaze of Bob Burglar Island had beaten them all with 4 ships filled with Bobs from top to bottom. Finn had given up on the math. It only made him more nervous. But it blew his mind how large this wedding had turned out to be. Adriana, who sadly wasn't the most popular individual across the archipelago, would have a large turnout despite his estimations. Apparently to Vikings it didn't matter Adriana was the daughter of a chief. It would be a great insult if nobody showed up. But he figured everybody present actually wanted to be there, whether they knew Adriana or not. It was a good excuse to eat lots of food and try Gobba's famous wine. Strangely enough though, he found himself wondering that if his sister had more than 300 people show up to her wedding, how much larger would his wedding day be one day? You know it's bad if Finn's nervous. Shut up, Cliff, I'm not nervous. Finn muttered, straightening his vest again despite his words. Cliff raised his eyebrows. Do you need to pee? No, I don't need to. Finn spun around. Why do you have to ask me that all the time? Because you're always salty when you have to pee. I'm not salty. Cliff pursed his lips. If you don't go now, you'll regret it. Finn bit back another retort when Astrid walked in. Now was not the time for bickering. Everyone was lining up behind him, all the girls giggling and whispering. Helga winked when she noticed him looking over his shoulder. He faced forward and exhaled. Astrid took his arm. Ready. Ready for it to be over. Finn sighed. Laughing, Astrid squeezed his arm. Good practice for your own big day. He rolled his eyes. Please, we're a way off from there. That's okay, Finn. In front of them, Grandma Ingerman waved. Another glance over his shoulder showed his dad and sister at the end of the line. Finn's heart rate doubled. It was time. Chin up, Mr. Haddock, whispered Grandma Ingerman as she grasped the door handles. You look like a chief. Fantabulous, he whispered back, smirking. Cliff gasped behind him. He used my word. The doors flung open and their small talk ceased. The graceful sound of a harp began playing inside the chamber. Finn exhaled and, arm in arm with his mother, led the procession. He'd thought his heart would be pounding in his throat by now. That's what they all said, wasn't it? Standing in front of so many people, waiting for the love of his life to walk down the aisle, he was supposed to be nervous, right? Something kept Eric calm as he stood at the altar, watching as Finn and Astrid strode down the aisle with confidence. The impressed whispers from the crowd didn't escape his notice either. Finn had never looked more, chiefly. Was that even a real word? Eric almost wanted to ask Adriana next time he saw her, though that might be a slightly weird thing to ask at his own wedding. Perhaps that was why he wasn't nervous, he thought as he watched Cliff walk down the aisle, Taryn on his arm. Tall, gangling, and clumsy as Hiccup himself, Cliff seemed so much more relaxed and even graceful than usual. Perhaps it was the girl on his right arm. They seemed comfortable together. That's how Eric felt about Adriana. The soft harp wafting throughout the chamber cast the perfect mood. A swift glance in the instrument's direction showed a girl with blonde, curly hair plucking at the strings with a graceful smile. He'd never seen her before and made a quick mental note to thank her once the ceremony was finished. Her fingers plucked and strummed with such skill, he was momentarily enraptured. So much so that he almost didn't notice when the crowd stood as one and faced the back of the room. Looking towards the back, Eric's heart leapt. There she was, his bride, his Annie. Hiccup and Adriana stepped down the aisle with even steps. The soft coos of many women could be heard. It seemed Eric wasn't the only one to think Adriana was positively beautiful in the white gown with her hair pinned back and bouquet of white and purple flowers. Adriana usually didn't like crowds, but today, right now, she only had eyes for Eric. Her green eyes were locked on him, beaming. She was such a vision, he'd never seen her so beautiful, not even on their engagement day. His eyes burned and he quickly wiped them at the corners. Finn snorted softly and subtly elbowed him in the ribs. Eric grinned at him shortly, not caring how ridiculous he looked. Finally, Hiccup and Adriana reached the end of the aisle and the music stopped. Gobber, momentarily standing in for Hiccup, stepped forward in his musty suit that smelled of mothballs. Whoever gives this woman to be wedded to this man? Her mother and I do. Hiccup said softly. Still beaming, Adriana hugged him tightly. Hiccup kissed her forehead before placing her hand in Eric's. The chief gave his wrist a gentle squeeze before walking around them and taking Gobber's place. The old man hobbled down the steps to sit beside Astrid, blowing his nose loudly in his hanky and muttering about children growing up so fast. Eric grinned at Adriana, and his heart leapt with joy when she grinned back. They were finally here, after months of planning, years of dreaming. He was getting married to Adriana Haddock, his best friend and the joy of his life. Hiccup softly cleared his throat and together, they faced the front. His dimples were showing. He was so adorable when his dimples were showing. Adriana felt so giddy, it was so incredibly difficult to hold still. Hiccup glanced at each of them, then back down at his notes. Cleared his throat again. Adriana could hear the rustling of the crowd behind them. She smiled encouragingly at her dad, knowing how hard this moment must be for him. Finally, he looked up at the crowd. I want to personally thank each and every one of you for coming today to celebrate this union between Erik Noah Larsen and Adriana. His voice caught and he paused, looking back down. Finn sighed and Adriana gave him a sharp look, but then she couldn't help the laugh when her brother, Cliff, Taryn, and Helga held out handkerchiefs. Hiccup's surprised blink caused a ripple of chuckles to permeate the room, even from Erik. The chief took his son's light blue handkerchief and tucked it in his leather folder. That wasn't in the notes, Hiccup said, clearing his throat again. More chuckles echoed through the chamber. When the crowd quieted once again, he continued, as many of you know, my family has gone through many trials. The starkest memory was when Adriana was very young. Our family was lost and struggling, and we didn't know what to do. But the first ray of sunshine was when a little boy, whom we'd never met before, decided to show a little kindness. Adriana squeezed Erik's hand, giving him a loving smile. That was the beginning of Erik Larsen's treachery in stealing my baby girl away from me, Hiccup continued, giving Erik a fake stink eye. The crowd laughed again. I don't have to tell most of you that nothing could separate these two. They were thick as thieves and had numerous adventures around the village. With Adriana's bright personality and Erik's level-headedness to keep her out of trouble, they've been best friends for most of their lives. Trials and hardship can either make or break you. Neither of these two are strangers to pain. They've each suffered losses. Loss of loved ones, limbs, emotional distress, amongst other things. However, their loyalty to each other has made their friendship stronger. Hiccup looked at Erik. Kiddo, you've been a second son to me. I've always appreciated your kindness, humility and loyalty. I'm entrusting you with my greatest treasure. I hope and pray that you'll treasure her as much as, and I hope more than, I have. Erik nodded gently. And Hiccup took a deep breath. Your father and sister would be so proud of you. Don't ever forget that. Erik swallowed hard, nodding again. Adriana squeezed his hand, knowing he was trying not to choke up. She knew, however, that he had to miss his dad and out today more than any other day. Hiccup swallowed and paused a brief moment before facing her. His green eyes, bright like her own, were already glassy. Addie. Her eyes instantly welled up. She waved a hand at her eyes, causing a few titters. Your mom and I had a running joke when she was pregnant. She wanted a boy, I wanted a girl. We'd argue night and day what it was. And then he looked over at Finn, who smirked. We got both. Hiccup looked back at her. While we're still working on the wild one, snickers erupted when Finn shrugged his eyebrows. You, Addie, have always been my girl. You're very much like I was as a kid. Quick-witted, creative and clumsy. Adriana laughed, wiping her eyes with her free hand. In many ways, you're the strongest in the family. Your kindness and endurance are unfathomable based on the things you've been through. But he's going to need support. It's hard work, providing for a family. You're a team in more than just friendship now. It's teamwork till the end, in everything, every day. Stay loyal, stay strong. There's no other young man I'd rather give you to than this one. I know you're going to be an amazing wife and a wonderful mother. Hiccup said, his voice cracking at the end. Beaming, Adriana nodded. With a short exhale and shake of his head, Hiccup cleared his throat. Adriana snorted and he playfully narrowed his eyes at her. Finn's lips were pursed. Clearly he was trying to restrain any sassy comments from bursting forth. Please face each other. Hiccup instructed. Almost giddily, Adriana faced Eric, his dimples were returning and his teal eyes were bright. Eric, is there anything you would like to say to Adriana? Eric smiled at their clasped hands before looking up at her. She gave him a wide, cheeky grin that made him restrain a laugh. Annie, I've loved you for most of my life. I can't promise that everything will always go perfectly, but I promise to take care of you and to protect you and our family no matter the cost. Hiccup looked to her next. Addie, is there anything you'd like to say to Eric? Adriana took a breath. Where do I begin? You're my best friend. You always have been. After everything we've been through, after this last year. She faltered, voice quavering. She looked down, trying to regain composure and looking at her belly in the process. Eric rubbed his thumb across the back of her hand. She looked back up at him with a watery smile. There isn't anyone else I'd rather spend my life with and to help me raise my child. You're the best thing that's ever happened to me, and I can't wait to start this next adventure. Eric beamed, raising her hands to kiss them chastely. Adriana vaguely heard some sniffs around the room and wondered who might be crying out there in the crowd. Her daddy had lost it minutes ago. She looked over at him and restrained a laugh when she saw his tear-stained face. Keep it together, man. Finn whispered. Hiccup sniffed, his voice thick with emotion. Oh gods, let it be over. He snapped his leather folder shut. I pronounce you man and wife. Eric, kiss your bride. Eric pulled her in closer and kissed her soundly to a chorus of cheers. Adriana held him tightly, only pulling away when she needed air. Eric rested his forehead against hers and whispered, I love you. I love you too, babe. Adriana said back, though the crowd's cheering drowned out her words. Finn cupped his hands around his mouth and yelled, now, zap. The still clapping crowd looked at the aqua-blue dragon in question in time to see her strike her tail through the air. A bolt of electricity shot toward what looked like a large balloon, which promptly exploded and blew purple and blue confetti into the air. The crowd cheered in approval, Rough Nut and Tough Nut pounded their helmets together while Snot Loud pumped his fists into the air, and Astrid dried her eyes. Gustav and Magnus' families were hugging and congratulating each other. Even Lara was beaming and blew a kiss toward her youngest son, who smiled at her gratefully. Gobber waved his wedding bell prosthetic frantically through the air, nearly taking off a Brawnian guard's head. Adriana hugged her brother, who seemed very pleased with his surprise. Congratulations, Mrs. Larson. He yelled over the din. Thanks. Adriana took Eric's hand and, after throwing one last grin at her dad, who was shining with pride, marched back up the aisle with her new husband. The inhabitants of the archipelago hadn't seen such a celebration in decades. With so many guests from various islands present with their gifts, the edge was full to near bursting. As always, Ben the baker and his team of Berk's finest cooks had prepared a fine meal of roast boar, chicken, and fish, platters of colorful fruits and vegetables, baked goods from fresh bread to potato rolls, sweet buns and pies. The drink bar was nearly overflowing, Gobber having brought out nearly 30 kegs of ale and his now perfected wine. Rosy-cheeked and guffawing with laughter, every guest seemed to be enjoying the celebration. The bride and groom had made their rounds to thank their guests and were forced to stop every few minutes to kiss when the pounding of cups began again. Adriana would roll her eyes and oblige them, kissing her new husband soundly. Eric didn't seem to mind, grinning brightly for all to see. Finn snorted into his mug when the pounding started up again not 2 minutes after their last kiss. Adriana sighed melodramatically this time, saying something that sounded an awful lot like, well, if you insist. Casting a look around the room in search of a friend, Finn unbuttoned the top of his white shirt and blue vest. With all these people and dragons and hot food, he could feel the material beginning to stick to his skin. Hey! Cliff said, popping around the pillar and nearly slopping Finn's drink down his shirt. Have you seen Taryn? How should I know where your girlfriend is? Finn asked flatly. I've been looking for her for 20 minutes. Every time I see her, she disappears again. Cliff said, brow furrowed. Maybe she's playing hard to get. Finn smirked, sipping his drink. Cliff blinked. What do you mean? It's a game, bruh. Chase that girl down, that's what she wants. Yeah. Cliff asked in surprise. You're sure she's not running away because she doesn't want to see me for some peculiar reason of which I have no idea? Finn raised a brow in response. The curly-haired boy snorted. You're right, that'd be ridiculous. Exactly. Don't overthink it, Cliff, just go find her. Finn said, swirling the ale in his cup. Or she'll find you. Cliff watched him for a second. And what are you doing? Finn shrugged. Just catching my breath. By yourself in a room full of people. Rolling his eyes, Finn pushed off the pillar he'd been leaning against and playfully shoved Cliff into the crowd. Go find your girlfriend, Cliff. I'm fine. Weaving through the crowd, Finn waved or nodded at anyone who greeted him. A group of girls from Brawn waved and gestured for him to join their table. He tried to ignore their look of disappointment when the only thing he gave them was a smile. Truthfully, it was getting unbelievably stuffy in here and he just wanted a minute of peace. Finally he managed to push his way outside and jog up the stairs to the upper level. Few people were up here, mainly guards. The chilly air felt good on his sweaty face. Stars twinkled in the cloudless, cerulean sky. Waves hit the rocky shore far below while pine trees creaked in the woods behind the fort. He could hear the booming laughter of Vikings and feel the beat of cups on the tables. Finn took a deep breath of air and closed his eyes, blocking out the noise. How long he stood up there in the quiet he didn't know, but he heard the mismatched footsteps long before his dad joined him at the railing. You all right? Finn took another deep breath. Yeah. Just taking a minute, it was getting hot in there. These things do tend to get a little stuffy. Hiccup commented, wiping his brow on his tunic sleeve. Your mom saw you leave and when you didn't come back, well, I just wanted to check in. I'm good, Finn said truthfully. Good. So you'll have no reservations if I introduce you to someone? Hiccup asked. Finn sighed. And interrupt my peace and quiet. Trust me, Finn, I think you'll like this intro. Hiccup said, excitement barely masked in his voice. Who is it? Kiev's family. Oh, okay. Finn nodded in agreement, following his dad down the stairs. Kiev is cool. Did Ivan make it? Yes, he and his wife. They left their children home with one of Ivan's sisters. Also, fix your hair, it's sticking up all over the place. Finn shook his hair out and combed it down. He must have run his hands through it after coming outside. Better. Hiccup grinned, opening the door back into the loud reception room. Finn followed his dad through the crowd, feeling clearer and refreshed. It didn't feel quite as overwhelming now. Hiccup led him to a table where a group of people was clustered. Chief Kara of Brawn patted Finn on the arm as she left the table and rejoined her husband. Kiev was shaking Hiccup's hand, thanking him profusely for the invitation. Burke knows how to throw a party. Kiev said jovially. We Jatans love a good revelry. I wonder if we've met our match. We don't throw parties very often, so I'm sure your people have well perfected it, Hiccup replied. Finn, how are you? Kiev asked, spotting him at last. Good, sir, yourself? Wonderful. It's been an honor to attend your sister's wedding. She is truly lovely. Also, you look a lot better today than the last time I saw you. Finn laughed. I feel a lot better than the last time you saw me. Kiev also laughed. Well, while I have you here, I wanted to introduce you to my family. Mind, this isn't even half of them. Finn snorted as Kiev's wife stood and shook his hand. This is my wife, Molly. Hello, Finn, Molly said with bright, smiling eyes. She was a slightly plump woman with warm brown eyes and dark, curly hair. I'm pleased to finally meet you. Kiev hasn't stopped talking about you. He'll be announcing your engagement soon, remarked a tall, dark-haired boy around Finn's age that he assumed was their son. He stuck out a hand, grinning. Thuggery Sullivan, at your service. Finn replied dryly. You're the one forbidden to meet Cliff. Who is this Cliff you all speak of? Thuggery asked. Yeah, it's never happening. Finn muttered to Hiccup, who snickered. Whatever sarcastic retort Finn had in mind next disappeared when Molly grabbed the arm of a pretty girl with blonde, curly hair and pulled her into the circle. "And this," Molly said proudly, "is our daughter, Genevieve." Genevieve blinked up at him in surprise, but she recovered quickly. "Hi." She also held out a hand to shake. Finn shook it and smiled, suddenly unsure what to say. Was it her deep brown eyes and that pretty smile, or the way the flyaway blonde curls framed her face in the humid room that had stuck his tongue to the roof of his mouth? Whatever the case, Finn suddenly had nothing to say. "Well, I'm off to find this cliff," Thuggery announced, breaking the silence and Finn's eye contact with Genevieve. "I wouldn't do that, if I were you. He's otherwise engaged." "Oh?" Thuggery asked. "What's more important than meeting this guy?" He jerked a thumb at himself. "His girlfriend." Oh, Thuggery's eyebrows shrugged up and down. "Okay then. Until next meeting. I have other things I wanted to check out anyway, like that awesome Zipley back for example." Later, realizing the Zipley back in question was in fact Barf and Belch, Hiccup marched after the Sullivan boy, probably to make sure he didn't get up to shenanigans with the Thorsten twins. "Oh, that's a rather large dragon, dear," Molly murmured, staring after her son. "Don't you think we should?" "He's got Hiccup, he'll be fine," Kiev said calmly. Molly drew herself up to her full height, which was, in fact, a solid 5 foot and 2 inches. "He'll need all the help he can get." Finn watched in surprise as the small woman marched after the Dragon Conqueror, Kiev sputtering behind her about how just last week she'd insisted flying lizards were a danger to society. "Though she be small, she be fierce," Genevieve said, smiling. "It would seem so." Finn grinned. "Any woman willing to tackle a Zipley back would be." "Oh, she won't get within 10 feet. Genevieve waved a hand. "She's terrified of dragons. But she's more afraid of Thuggery doing something stupid and getting himself eaten." Finn hid a smile. "Well, she won't have to worry much there. Dragons don't eat people. Unless, I suppose, it was hungry enough." Genevieve's eyes glittered. "I mean, I've seen some pretty hungry dragons and I've yet to see a human become dinner." Genevieve grinned. "Ah, well, being the son of the Dragon Conqueror, you'd be the expert." "You're making me blush, Miss Sullivan. And you're sure that's not the ale?" Finn couldn't help the laugh that escaped him. Genevieve grinned and looked away, brushing the flyaway curls out of her eyes. "So she's quick-witted," Finn remarked, leaning against a nearby pole. "What else is she like?" "And he's snooky, what else is he like?" Genevieve asked. "Ladies first." Genevieve tutted. "We are bossy." "Well." Finn grinned, glancing down at his boots. He noticed she was wearing a white shirt tucked into a long green skirt and brown leather boots. His eyes flicked back up to her face. "She's crafty, intuitive, observant." She bobbed a shoulder. "Nothing too interesting." "Sounds somewhat interesting." Finn tsked. "You might have to divulge some details about this girl, else I might feel a yawn coming on." "Well, we can't have that, she likes to make a good impression," Genevieve said. "Well, she likes a crowd, likes to meet new people and ask questions. Lots and lots of questions. So many, in fact, that she's been bursting at the seams all day." "Fire away." Finn smirked. Genevieve's growing smile faltered at the look and he felt a thrill of excitement when her playful, demure disposition broke and she looked away to clear her throat and regain composure. "So many to choose from, it's hardly easy to ask." "I've got time." Genevieve's eyes were crinkled at the edges, like she was withholding a laugh. "Did your dad and his team really use this place as a hideout against dragon hunters?" Finn exhaled. Loaded question. My response is, I guess so. Truth be told, I only just learned about it a few short weeks ago. Really? Genevieve's playful edge dropped in an instant, replaced by real curiosity. You never came here as a kid? Your parents never showed it to you? Devastating, isn't it? Have you searched every square inch looking for signs of their adventures? Laughing, Finn said, another loaded question. Honestly, there isn't much here other than the buildings you see. They spent just as much time flying around the archipelago as they did here. I see, Genevieve said. It's all very interesting. Which part? Dragon riding, secret hideaways, adventures. All of it. There's only so much you can get from books. Oh boy, don't let my sister hear you say that, Finn warned. There's no better spiritual experience than that which comes from a novel. Genevieve snorted. She said that. She's also pregnant and highly emotional right now. Well, I would be too, look at her. Genevieve pointed with a hand. Finn noticed she and Eric were on the dance floor, which was clearing so they could have their first dance. His sister looked like she was on cloud 9, but her eyes were starting to droop. She's getting tired, he said quietly. You must care for her deeply, Genevieve replied with a smile. Well, she is my twin. She hasn't had it easy. The baby's father, he's not present, is he? Finn fought the skull. No. Genevieve seemed to realize she'd misspoken. I'm sorry, that wasn't my place. No, it's okay, Finn said quickly. Really, don't worry about it. You're not the first to ask. He sighed, looking back at his sister. If he showed his face tonight, well, he wouldn't make it across the threshold. She held a hand out toward the dance floor where other couples, including Cliff and Taryn, were starting to join the bride and groom. Are you going to dance? Is that an invitation? Finn grinned. Genevieve flushed, making him laugh. Honestly, I'm not a dancer. No. Genevieve asked, embarrassment forgotten. It's very fun, and great exercise. Music is great for the soul. We Jatans learn the beauty of music from a young age. Do you play any instruments then? Genevieve smiled shyly. I do, actually. I play the harp and a few other instruments. Finn blinked. Wait. You were the harpist during the ceremony? She nodded. Yes. Your dad invited us to the wedding on his last visit and I offered my talents. I thought it was a great way to make friends. In fact, I met Eric right after the ceremony ended. He came up to me right after the reception started to say thank you. Finn nodded. He doesn't miss a detail. Unlike you, Genevieve smirked. He made a face. My talents are kept elsewhere. Burke is as tone-deaf as they come. I'll stick to swords and dragon riding. She tutted again. Boys. Boys. Helga suddenly appeared, arms crossed. More than just boys fight with swords and ride dragons here. Genevieve blinked, shocked at the other girl's sudden appearance. Oh. I'm sorry. Helga snorted and laughed. Don't look so terrified, I'm just messing with ya. Finn winced when Genevieve gave an unsure ah. The poor girl clearly didn't know how to reply to one so brash as Helga in German. So Helga rested an arm on his shoulder and twirled her finger in the air, pointing toward the dessert table. Your dragon is up. Finn straightened and saw Zap sniffing the wedding cake. Fingers between his teeth, he whistled as loud as he could. Zap yelped and hopped into a sitting position, looking around for her rider. She saw him and gave a stout aru, her tongue lolling out of her mouth. Oh! Cooed Genevieve. Finn rolled his eyes at the beast. Don't you aru me. Aru. Aru to you too. Aru. Zap crowed, her nose pointing to the rooftops and the nearest people covering their ears. Finn was waving his hands but it was no use. Zap hopped back onto her feet and looked between the cake and Finn. No. Zap tossed her head. No, Zap. Don't, Finn and Genevieve gasped when Zap whipped around to face him, her tail nearly grazing the table. Her wings started to shimmer and she ducked her head playfully at him. Arg, she's getting restless, I haven't flown her since this morning. He looked regrettably at Genevieve. I've got a deal with her. Oh, that's fine, Genevieve waved a hand, brushing the stray curls out of her eyes again. Go ahead and take care of your dragon. Finn didn't want to go. She was the most interesting girl he'd ever talked to. Of course his dragon had to act up now and a quick glance at his parents showed that, yes indeed, the Thorstons and Thuggery were up to no good with Barf and Belch. The last thing he wanted was for his dragon to ruin his sister's wedding cake because he ignored the problem. Nope, he needed to deal with it. Well hey, it was really nice to meet you, Finn said, fully aware of Helga still standing beside him. I enjoyed talking to you. Likewise, Finn. Genevieve said, smiling brightly. Maybe I'll see you again sometime. Yeah, I'd like that. Aruru. Finn tried to quickly think of something else to say, but Helga had other plans. Oh come on, cake waits for no man. She stepped behind him and shoved him forward by the shoulders. Genevieve hopped out of the way just in time. Well, talk to you later then. Finn yelled over his shoulder. Bye. Genevieve waved. Zap wriggled excitedly as he approached. He slapped Helga's hands off his shoulders, glaring at her. Zap shoved her face into his arms and he scratched her scales. What? Helga crossed her arms. Don't give me the kicked puppy look, I haven't seen your eyes that attached to a skirt in years. Yeah. Finn demanded. Helga rolled her eyes. I don't care, I'm just saying Zap was about to destroy. And what, you've never ridden Zap before? She doesn't trust you. Actually no, not enough to listen to me. I tried to make her go away while your head was in the clouds, and the rest of your family is a bit occupied. Finn huffed. Okay, thanks, crisis averted. If you take her for a flight, she might calm. I know how to take care of my dragon, Helga. The blonde raised her hands to the sky with a wide-eyed look of irritation before disappearing back into the crowd. All too aware of people's eyes on him, Finn grabbed Zap around the left horn. Come on, you. Let's go outside. Zap whined but obliged, her tail drooping. The crowd parted for him and the dragon as they made their way outside. The air was colder this time and he briefly wondered if they should fly to the guy's hut to grab a warmer jacket, but he decided against it. He didn't want to waste time and hopefully he'd be able to find Genevieve again. He thought about her the entire flight. In order to satisfy his dragon's restlessness, they flew for a good half-hour before returning to the reception. The warmth of the building was a comfort this time and he looked around eagerly, hoping to find the Sullivans. But he was too late. Their table was deserted when he returned. Looking for someone? Astrid asked, a hand on his arm when he remained standing in the aisle. Perhaps he'd looked a little lost because she had a slight look of concern on her face. Where'd the Sullivans go? You just missed them, Astrid replied, bobbing ahead toward the doorway. Finn looked in that direction with surprise, wondering if he ran fast enough if he could catch up. His hopes were further dashed to pieces when she continued, your father offered them a hut to stay the night, but they insisted that would be overstaying their welcome, which is absurd of course. Astrid added with a playful scoff. Their ship left the harbor about 10 minutes ago. Oh. Finn said, trying not to look disappointed. It might look a little ridiculous to chase after their ship on the open sea with Zap. Astrid pursed her lips, like she was hiding a smile. You'll see her again. Who? Finn demanded. Dunno what you're talking about. His mom gave a quick bark of laughter. Right, okay. She patted his shoulder and joined Hiccup, who was laughing nearby with Snotlout and Fish Legs. Finn disappeared into the crowd, trying to find another friend. Figures the first girl he met just so happened to be the most interesting girl he'd ever met, and she had to up and disappear not 10 minutes later. He sighed inwardly. He spotted Eric and Adriana preparing a knife to cut the wedding cake. Adriana was gushing at the beautiful handmade sugar flowers covering the top. Ben the baker was nearly glowing as much as the bride herself. Cliff and Taryn were still slow dancing across the room, and by the way they were looking at each other Finn doubted they cared that anyone else was present. The happy look on Cliff's face made Finn turn away, not out of jealousy, but because if it had been him, he'd kill any of his friends that interrupted the moment. The heir swiped a mug of ale off a tray and sighed, trying to ignore the feeling of love in the air and the vision of dark eyes and blonde hair clouding his mind. Man, could she run? Cliff hadn't been so sure when Finn said that Taryn was running away on purpose, like it was a game. He was glad he'd listened though. Not 5 minutes after he'd spoken to Finn, he'd found Taryn grinning at him from across the room. He'd run for what felt like miles, around and around and around the reception room, and each time, Taryn would dart out of his grasp and run away, her brown eyes alight with mischief. That's when he realized he needed to play it sneaky. It took a while of creeping around the room like a clumsy troll that had lost its way, but eventually he found Taryn hiding behind a pillar. She was peeking around it in search of him, he was sure. He debated momentarily how he should make his presence known, he hadn't thought that far ahead. He could lean up against the pillar and try to be all suave and macho like Finn, but nah, that wasn't him. With his luck, he'd miss the pillar and wipe out, alerting Taryn to his presence and make her run away again. And truth be told, he was tired of running, he wanted to be with her. Instead of taking the macho route, Cliff smirked at an idea that popped into his head. He reached out and dug his fingers into Taryn's waist. With a scream full of laughter she whipped around to slap his hands away. She made a break for it, but not before he grabbed her wrist and dug his heels into the floor. "Nah, Miss Brand," Cliff crowed, pulling her back toward him. "I've gotcha." Taryn gave up easily, her face flushed from so much running around. She didn't remove her hand from his and was still looking at him mischievously. He'd never tire of that look. Cliff twined their fingers together as they strolled back into the crowd. Thorin gave him a hearty pat on the back when he passed by. Clearly the guys thought he was doing something right. Taryn grabbed a couple waters from the drink table and offered him one. "I didn't think you'd ever catch up, Slowpoke." "Slowpoke?" Cliff demanded, spilling water down his shirt. Taryn brushed the droplets away, grinning. "I'm a Speedy Gonzales, I'll have you know." One of her auburn brows rose. "A Speedy what no?" "You know, I have no idea, it just came out." Taryn giggled, sipping her water as she gazed about the room. The room was packed with people from various villages, so many people that Cliff hardly recognized anyone. Looking back at Taryn, he found her staring at the dance floor across the room, where Adriana and Eric were being joined by other couples. "Want to dance?" Taryn dropped her cup on an empty tray. "As long as you don't break my toes." Cliff scoffed. "I'm as light as a butterfly, I'm incapable of breaking toes." He shot his glass of water back and hacked, choking when the ice-cold liquid went down the wrong way. "Ugh, it burns." "Oh come on," Taryn laughed, grabbing his hand and dragging him to the dance floor. Cliff coughed into his sleeve. "You may have to help dispel the water from my lungs, Miss Brand. Aunt Mara says you can still drown if you don't." "Cliff, you're not gonna die, if it was that serious you wouldn't be talking." Taryn rested her hands on his shoulders and began to gently sway to the music. Cliff gave a melodramatic sigh, resting his hands in her waist. "Ah well, at least my last day on this earth was filled with love and happiness. I shall rest in Valhalla in peace." "What are you talking about? You're not going anywhere, not if I can help it. Odin can tell his Valkyries to come back later." "You don't just tell Odin to send his Valkyries later, that's not how it works," Cliff snickered. "Well, they can take me with you then," Taryn said simply. Cliff blinked. "What? Why?" Taryn looked up at him, face somber. "Well, because I don't want to be separated from you." His heart gave a sharp BA bump at the words. A small smirk lit up her face. "I'm not tired of you just yet." Cliff breathed a laugh, resting his forehead against hers. "I'm not tired of you just yet either, Miss Brand." Taryn smiled back up at him. They swayed to the music for a while, enjoying each other's company, unaware of the hundreds of people gathered around them. Cliff didn't care that they were in the middle of the room, standing closer together than they ever had. Everyone's eyes were on Eric and Adriana while his were on Taryn's. Her long auburn hair had been pinned up all day, but with the humidity of the room and all their running around it had started falling out. She kept brushing the long strands out of her face. He wished she wouldn't. The messy, not perfect version of Taryn was his favorite. Not to mention the lilac dress she'd been wearing all day. When he first saw her before walking down the aisle, he nearly proposed right then and there. But he'd figured that was a little brash, to be found proposing to his girlfriend in the middle of the processional for his bestest brother's wedding. And honestly, he wasn't ready for marriage just yet. With all the insanity of planning this wedding, he knew for a fact that he wasn't ready. But seeing Taryn now with a rosy glow in her cheeks and her arms around his neck while they danced, he knew he'd be ready when the time was right. Taryn tilted her head back, looking him full in the face. Cliff raised his eyebrows in silent question, wondering what was on her mind. What he didn't expect was for her to stand on her tiptoes and kiss him. A million thoughts and sensations exploded in his brain almost instantaneously, but he could only focus on one. Her lips were softer than he'd imagined. The second kiss pulled him out of the initial shock, his brain catching up with the rest of him. Her hair was soft at his fingertips, and when he kissed her back, he could have sworn that she was fighting back a smile. She pulled away, her forehead pressed to his even as she exhaled heavily. He stared at her in complete shock. She laughed and pulled at a stray curl at his temple. "I've waited a long time to do that." "Yeah?" Cliff asked, voice higher than he'd meant. He cleared